next to the maybe try going out.
I got it. I'm good. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi. I gotcha. Sorry.
Okay, can you test your hand emoji next to the record button for me, please? Thank you. Got you. You're all set. Everyone is on and everyone is operational. So,
do you want me to start the stream? By the way, we're still.
Marco, are we good to go?
We still have a lot of callers coming in. Some of the lower numbers are not on the list yet. If you want to get in 3 minutes, I'll just go ahead and just call it in. I think I've been working on it.
Okay, let me knock it to your hands. Get started, Marco, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let me just start the stream. Okay. Stream's live.
Thank you, Marco. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of this Board of Education on July 25th, 2023. I'm going to call the meeting to order. With us this evening is Mrs. Vitale, Mrs. Rotelli, Mrs. Guernsey, myself, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, and Mrs. Kelly, and Mr. Testani. If everyone could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. I'm sure more people will be joining us as we proceed. Before we get started this evening with our business item, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping notes for everyone that is joining us tonight. Our host will call the names of those who registered to speak in the order in which you registered. You will be unmuted so that you can share your thoughts, input, or any questions you may have with the board. You will have up to 2 minutes to present your conversation topic or any questions you may have, at which time we will move on to any responses by the board. For the board members, if you could use your hand emoji so I could see who would like to respond, I will call on you in order for you to give feedback, and we will go around how it goes this evening. Just so everyone is aware, we do have 68 speakers this evening. So perhaps for the public and for the board, should a question or a topic have already been addressed, you may think about possibly raising a different question or a different topic so we can keep our dialogue and conversation moving along this evening. So with that, I will move on to our business item for this evening, which is the community conversation regarding racial balance, academic excellence, facility utilization, and our redistricting scenarios. And with that, I will hand it back to our host to begin the speaker lineup this evening. Marco, would you like to call the first speaker?
Yep, one sec. We have Danielle Gaffond.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. My name is Danielle Gelsand, and my family are Sherman Walkers. First, I wanted to thank all of you for tackling this redistricting issue. We know it's challenging, controversial, and there's no way to make everyone happy. We really appreciate that in all of this, the board and the consultants have maintained the emphasis on walkers and keeping walkers as walkers for the benefit of our children and school communities. I'm speaking on behalf of my family to encourage you to continue supporting keeping walkers as walkers as this process continues. All of our schools have vibrant walker communities. Walking to school has proven benefits for physical and mental health, fighting obesity, building community, and savings on costs and the environment. I also want to point out that Scenario 4 already impacts walkers. It is imperative that Scenario 4B does not impact more walkers than Scenario 4 already does. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you for your comment. Could you just state your address for the record, please, as well? Thank you so much, and for all the other callers as well, just like we would do in a regular meeting. Sorry.
Hi, sorry, like the phone was saying 10 different things while you were speaking, but I believe you asked for my address, correct?
Yes.
57 Newell Place.
Thank you so much. All right, board members who would like to respond.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next person.
We have Rav Kapoor.
Hi, thank you guys so much for putting this together. I'm Rav Kapoor, 254 Lucille Street. I just was wondering, how feasible do you guys think this is for actually being implemented in the 2024 school year? And if so, will it be like fully implemented? Because I know you have to take this to the state and everything. So is this entirely feasible to be done by the 2024 school year?
Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thanks for your question. In my opinion, it's feasible. All the indications we've been given by the administration are that it is feasible. You know, one of the reasons that we're on the schedule that we are now is to try to make decisions about the 24-25 school year in time for the budget for the 24-25 school year to be put together. So that's a big constraint that we have right now, and I know that's one of the reasons that we're operating as we are kind of through the summer, to try to get this in time to make a decision and get it to the superintendent so we can form the budget for that school year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Sorry, one second. I'm just fielding a bunch of different calls. 1 second.
No worries.
We have Courtney Raduleslavsky. We have Courtney. I believe it is sent an unmute to you. Let me know if you didn't get it.
Hi, good evening. My address is 337 Random Road.
Okay, go ahead, Courtney.
So I have a few questions, but is there anyone who is touring each school to see how the classrooms are set up? Do any members of the BOE actually go into any of the schools and see what's going on there and see how overutilized and pushed to the edges some of these classrooms are.
Would anyone like to respond? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Oh, you're on mute.
Damn it, sorry. Many of us have toured different schools at different points in time. We, for the most part, don't usually tour them while school is in session for privacy reasons and other that, and also many of us do work, so it's not possible to do it during the school day. But when it comes to what our buildings can handle, we do very much rely on administration to guide us in that, so that inappropriate decisions aren't made. So when it comes to the preschool program, when it comes to specialized programming, when it comes to what are good locations for things, I do believe central office is very open with us about, you know, in terms of directing those types of things to take into account the usage that you speak of.
Mr. Testani, did you have a follow-up?
I think Ms. Maxon Kennelly pretty much answered it, just to say that we are looking also at building floor plans. And if there are any questions, we are going out and visually looking at those in person as well throughout the summer.
Okay, thank you. My one comment is that I just hope that you, in this utilization process, do not push out kids due to specialized programming and push the programming into schools that are already overutilized. I really do ask that you go in there and look at all the classrooms and see how some of these classrooms are being pushed to the edges, how the students, you know, I've heard in some schools, you know, special programs, some of the classrooms are, you know, the size of a box. That I just very much ask that in this whole process, you do not push out neighborhood communities for specialized programming. I hope that you look for a place and factor in money into next year's budget to build a home for the ECC, and don't start spreading them around to other schools, because this is still going to be a problem in the future. ECC needs a proper home, and I hope that you factor that in to the budget for next year. And I also hope, if you don't have to implement anything in the 24-25 school year, that you please just have a thoughtful process and try and push it off and implement it, you know, in the coming years. Like, just please think about this and think about the future before you start moving children around.
Thank you, Courtney. Mrs. Ritelli, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
So one thing I wanted to say was, you know, I think it was really interesting when Mr. Testani shared, when we were talking at our last meeting, the amount of sections comparably in the scenarios that we've since dismissed. So in the case of 1A, where we would have repurposed school, we would have essentially had almost identical number of sections per grade in that model versus scenario 3, which goes to show everybody just how much room there is in all of our buildings collectively. So, and yes, a lot of our board members have toured the schools at different points. I know I have, over the last 4 years, taken every opportunity to go tour different schools. So I think there's a misperception of the utilization and how much space are in the different buildings collectively. And I also want everyone to be really careful with their words, because I think it's unfortunate that we have called, like after the last meeting, that a lot of our special ed programming has been called special programming, especially the ECC, when it's not. It's a school that has for some time been over capacity, and we've tried to solve it, and we can't quite plan as fast as that school is growing. I do think it's important that that school ends up with its own site in the future, but it's unfortunate, some of the emails that we've been getting that are characterizing our special ed classrooms as somehow the enemy of the school. Nobody wants them there. They don't want to displace anybody there for special programming, although you could displace people for a magnet school with special programming, but somehow our obligations to our special ed students are being looked at completely differently. And it's really, really disappointing to hear the conversations going on about that. And I want to be really careful because these programs are going to exist in our schools. And I want to make sure that our schools are welcoming to the staff and to the families and the children.
Thank you, Mrs. Rittelli. And as a quick follow-up, Courtney, the board is aware that as we get closer and narrow down any particular scenario, that an inventory of each and every building and how those classrooms will be utilized has been requested, and that we are well aware of the utilization of the buildings. Mrs. Rittelli, did you have something else? Your hand was still up. Sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay. All right, Marco, next.
We have Sydney Sullivan.
Hi, I am Sydney Sullivan. I live at 1213 Merritt Street. I'm going to try and get everything in 2 minutes. Based on the 3 solutions that were put forth as the best possible options, I don't have a lot of confidence in plans. I know in some capacity these decisions need to be made without emotion, but moving 3 kids from one school is callous and it lacks a certain amount of empathy that should be involved. I'm curious what data they are basing or have based their plans on. They mentioned, I believe, in the first meeting on about the satellite zones that it was based on demographics. Is that true for all scenarios, and does that include race as a part of the demographic? If it doesn't, how can they be sure that this will affect the change that is required? I'm curious if it would be more effective to have a town representative assist plan with the new neighborhood plan, new lines for Plan B, somebody who knows the nature of our town and our neighborhoods. I'm also curious on if we have provided them revised guidelines for what we want for 4B. Is there a minimum amount of kids we want moved? Are we suggesting different areas to pull into McKinley? Are we trying to fix any of the strange lines that currently exist? If it only ends up shifting a small amount of people, are we back where we started? Can there be a larger shift? I think that a larger shift would obviously give us a longer term solution, but the larger the shift, I think the more grandfathering would help ease that transition. And are we open to speaking about grandfathering at the same time as drawing lines? Thank you.
Who would like to take some of those? Mrs. Guernsey.
Just going to address the issue around grandfathering, which is something that I am really passionate about, especially at the high school level and for our transition years. And that's something that we have not had any discussions about. And as the board continues to receive more information from the superintendent, I don't know if he can speak to this now, but if in fact we have found that we're limited on the amount of busing that's available for our students, that's something that I think this board needs to consider very carefully, to the point that we could even need to reconsider the scenarios that we've already dismissed. So I don't know where we are with that because we haven't discussed it. And, I'm just waiting for more information on that, just like the public is waiting as well.
Mr. Peterson. You're on mute.
Apologies. Just relative to the idea of a town representative being involved for kind of neighborhood feel, we are all parents. We are all, or have had kids in the schools. I grew up here. Some of us have lived here for decades. A lot of the questions that are coming in from concerned parents, we know these neighborhoods well, and I think that we need to lean on our own experience. And if there's a question, get out and see it for ourselves. I have no objection to doing that, but I think we have a lot of experience here on this board to do that work.
I will jump in with one last comment that when we discussed a new scenario of 4B, the guidance or criteria that the board gave to administration was to possibly get those metrics better into the green zone than came in with scenario 4. So other than the criteria and guidance and considerations that were given in our original charge to the consultant, that was one area that the board had mentioned for the next scenario to come forth. All right, thank you, Sydney. Next.
We have Allison Fallon.
Good evening. I'm Allison Fallon, and I lived at 123 Wilson Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this evening's Board of Ed. Myself and my husband, John Fallon, both have called Fairfield home for well over a decade. We have two beautiful daughters who both love their North Strathfield school. My husband and I are teachers in neighboring districts. We've taught at both the middle school and high school levels. As both parents and as educators, we have seen how fragile the social emotional struggle of students has become in the last few years. My eldest daughter entered kindergarten during COVID. Like everyone else, she had a hybrid experience, but the amazing educators at NSS made kindergarten an amazing learning, social, and emotional experience. That is why we chose Fairfield, the quality of the teaching. The teaching has been excellent, but the district organization, unfortunately, has not. For 2 years now, my daughter has arrived on the first day of school, embraced by her new teacher and friends, and then moved classrooms because of the class sizes. After the second time, she asked us why she was being kicked out of her new class. When we were deciding where to purchase our home, we heard one clear, consistent message about Fairfield schools. Amazing programs, but they don't know how to do redistricting. They screw it up every time. Putting any more families than necessary through the struggle to as insensitive to families' lived experience and their sincerest wishes. Put plans 3 and 4 next to each other and the choice becomes clear. Plan 4 is graded with fair outcome for racial imbalance, good for utilization, fair for minimization of impact, and fair for Walker impact. Plan 3 is graded with a good outcome for racial imbalance, fair for utilization, good for minimization of impact, and good for Walker impact. The data speaks for itself. 4 is the least popular with less than 10% of the family survey and the least effective. Plan 3 is the most popular of the proposed scenarios and the most effective. This is not what Fairfield families are concerned about. What we are concerned about is our children's opportunities. The current scenario 4 would place many of my neighborhood children at Tomlinson, a wonderful school, but the furthest from our home. We would literally pass every other middle school on our way to Tomlinson. The children who live in our neighborhood will be on the bus for nearly an hour without traffic both ways, picked up first and dropped off last. I don't even know about other social circles, but the families we know have 2 working parents. Even without buses, we drop our kids off as soon as before care will let us at 7 a.m. On a good day, we might get them home before 5. Let's not forget that 60% of families have 2 working parents in this country. In the years where the greatest physical, mental, and emotional changes occur in our children, which I see firsthand as an 8th grade English teacher, we are asking them to commute like adults. This will keep children from participating in before and after school programs, including the small businesses that run the youth-oriented programs around town. This will also prevent children from having the needed time for homework, cutting an hour out of their afternoons. Students in high school are averaging over 2 hours of homework a night. Most crucially, this will keep the children from play. This is not a luxury. Playtime and socialization directly correlate with better academic and emotional growth. But this is not
Thank you, Allison. Sorry, your time had passed. Would anyone like to speak to the topics that were raised by Allison? Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your comments. And, first, let me just say that I don't like, I've been very vocal about the fact that I didn't like any of the plans that we received. But I will say in regards to the survey, it's not the least bit surprising to me that option 4 was the least popular, and that option 3 was the most popular, because the fewest people were impacted by group by option 3, and the most were impacted by option 4. So it would be logical that the outcomes of the survey would be what they were. And not to say that I don't take that seriously, not to say that I don't take people's concerns seriously on a number of levels, but I do think it's important to acknowledge the fact that 3 impact a very small group of families. And while I get that many families who aren't impacted thought that that was the best one, they did because they weren't impacted. And I think if they had been in the position of the smaller group of families who were going to be impacted by scenario 3, they would have felt very differently. Again, not saying I support 4, not saying I'm excited about 4, which is why we've asked them to change things. But I just think it's important to acknowledge that the survey results are completely logical based on the plans that we received.
Anyone else? Okay.
We have Annie Serlin.
Hello.
Hi, Annie. I can hear you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Annie Serlin. We're at 185 Flower House Drive, and we have 2 daughters at Riverfield School. I first want to thank the members of the board for tackling what is really a huge challenge, and for all of your efforts. I understand that this has been an arduous task, so thank you for hearing our points of view and for leading with compassion. As we try to solve for racial rebalancing, we ideally want to find a solution that also remains true to the strategy of Fairfield's public school system, which is based on a neighborhood school districts. This model has been very successful, it's been highly valued, and it's attracted a lot of people to the town of Fairfield. My family chose our home because of the proximity to our school, which is less than half a mile away, and the ability to walk there. So presumably scenario 4 is meant to preserve that model. I would propose that as we develop scenario 4, the ideal would be for us to find a version of it that is underpinned by objective common sense parameters and principles that are right for Fairfield's children. My greatest concern is that transforming current neighborhood school walkers into satellite busers to other schools miles away is the antithesis of neighborhood school strategy. It eliminates major health and emotional benefits, physical, psychological, and social well-being of the children who currently walk, and it places new and undue hardship on the walking children, adding hours of commuting time to their weekly schedules. It also creates additional unnecessary transportation costs for the Fairfield Public Schools. So as you review the options, please make choices that are based on clearly defined principles, such as a definition of neighborhoods based on proximity to schools, and please preserve walker communities in the best interests of our children. For these reasons, I think that the children who live closest to the schools should continue to be permitted to be walkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Okay, next person.
We have Michael Kalali.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hey, guys. Hey, my name is Mike Kaleli. I actually am Annie's neighbor on Flower House Drive, so nice follow-up. So I have a 2nd and 4th grader myself at Riverfield, and I've been following the redistricting closely. I was at the in-person event and spoke most recently at Ward a couple weeks back. I certainly appreciate and echo what Annie said about the board's engagement, the situation they're in. and think the approach to ensure that the town holistically feels the burden is a good principle. So I do support scenario 4. The other thing that was pretty clear in that conversation and then in subsequent conversation since then is that I agree talking about neighborhood schools and preserving communities, as I know a lot of people, including myself, including Annie, who just spoke, moved to Fairfield because of those communities in the schools. So I have a question about 4 as it relates to our street specifically, to Riverfield and to walkers. I can state unequivocally, we are walkers, not we could be walkers. We walk every day. My wife, both kids, myself, we walk, and we moved to this neighborhood to be walkers. We wanted to spend extra time with our kids. We wanted to encourage them to exercise, be outside, be a part of the community, know the crossing guards, and our street is 0.4 miles from Riverfield. I would strongly advocate for walkers, for community schools, protect the walkers, protect the communities, protect the traffic, protect the environment, and agree that if we need to move schools, I would propose busing students who are already being bused. So my question, and I know there are no maps currently drawn, and those will be coming. My questions would be, 1, how are you considering redistricting streets that are current walkers under 3/4 of a mile? Or how would you consider redistricting streets under a half a mile from their current school? And 2, what principles and or rules is the board using and providing to SLAM to make their decisions? Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Would anyone like to respond that maybe hasn't gone yet?
My hand's up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see it, Mr. Issa. Sorry, apologies. Go ahead, Mr. Issa.
No, I just want to say, I appreciate the comments thus far. And I think it's safe to say to try and answer the question, and Mr. Testani can correct me if I'm wrong, but our board defines walkers based on radiuses and at their grade level. So 3/4 of a mile for elementary school. If you are within 3/4 of a mile of a school and it is safe for you to walk, you are a walker. Buses are sometimes offered for people less than that when the situation is not safe. And there are many of those throughout the district at all the different schools. And some schools are 100% busing, even though people live next door to it, because it's just not safe. So I think from my understanding, when SLAM created their matrix that they've been using, when they say, affect, less than 5% of walkers to be in green, my assumption is that they are using that criteria as the guideline.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. All right, the next person.
We have Janice Hillman.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Hi, good evening. My name is Janice Hillman. I'm a mom of 2 girls at Sherman School. I'm also a 10-year resident of Catherine Terrace and a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist here in Fairfield. I'm speaking here tonight to strongly oppose the current redistricting proposal, which I believe irresponsibly disrupts the mental and educational well-being of children. While I oppose any traditional redistricting, I'm speaking tonight as a concerned resident for the Sherman School neighborhood. As it stands, SLAM has already specified that Sherman is an optimally utilized facility and geographically isolated by well-defined boundaries that create a natural community school zone. Disrupting that contradicts the knowledge and expertise of SLAM's consultants. Furthermore, it is unethical to move children from their neighborhood school, which is less than 1 mile from their home, across town to another school, forcing children to sit on a bus for upwards of 45 minutes before and after a long day at school for no good reason other than to evenly distribute the burden of redistricting on the entire community is disappointing and even more so cruel. Most of the other schools are relatively close to each other. Standing School, for example, is 5 minutes from Osborne Hill, Holland Hill, McKinley, and Stratfield. What is also concerning is that scenario 4 is the least effective at solving racial imbalance and will likely need to be readdressed in 1 to 2 years. As a parent and mental health care professional, I urge the board to pursue other ideas that will create less disruption, such as a magnet school, or to be more creative like some other towns like Greenwich are in addressing the issue of racial imbalance. Ultimately, I hope you will do what you were chosen to do and fight for the best interests of all our children. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Janice. Mr. Asa.
Yeah, I just want to not to address specifically everything that the caller just said, but one thing that this just made me think about is we've gotten a tremendous amount of emails that talk about being back here in 1 or 2 years and looking out, and that the projections have us falling out of racial imbalance. And I just want to remind people that when we look at those charts, they took the scenarios and put them in a look back. So a 7-year look back and what it would have looked at looking back. We don't necessarily have that crystal ball to look forward. And we've said that publicly. We don't know exactly where the numbers will be. But I think it's important for people to understand that when you're looking at that chart, and some people are interpreting it, I think, as, you know, in 1 or 2 years, when it says in the summary from SLAM, in 1 or 2 years, you were over 20% or at this percent. That's not in 1 or 2 years coming up. It is in the look back. So not discounting anything that was said there. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Asa. All right, Marco, next person.
We have Emma Burnett. Emma, I just sent you another request. Unmute.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Hi, my name is Emma Burnett. My address is 24 Cambridge Street. 2 of my children currently attend Sherman Elementary School. As well, I have 1 child at ECC Stratfield who is on track to attend Sherman in the 2024 school year, who's very excited to walk and bike to school with his sisters. I'm on this call tonight advocating for the Sherman community. However, I would be remiss to mention that for me, it is the utmost importance of also creating a unified ECC in our town for our youngest and most vulnerable learners, and I really hope that doesn't get lost in the shuffle of all of this. Quick thank you to the board for hosting and engaging with us tonight. I am asking the board to please keep neighborhoods together when considering redistricting and to let walkers be walkers, specifically in relation to the Sherman Elementary community and the maps regarding our school in scenario 4 or the future scenario 4B. My family is located off of South Benson in the Marina area of the Sherman districts. We are walkers. We do not receive a bus. We purchased our home with the specific intention for our children to live in this neighborhood and to walk and attend school with their neighbors, not to be bused to other schools outside of our neighborhood. There are so many at Sherman in this position, the same as ours. Sherman is the definition of a neighborhood school. Due to our natural geographic borders of our area, the majority of us here at Sherman are walkers, and we have an extremely strong sense of community and bonds here. As per SLAM had mentioned in a previous Q&A session, our school is currently optimally utilized and efficient. And with that, I just ask that you please keep our school together, but at the very least, please keep neighborhoods and communities together. The past 3 years have really left this generation of students struggling academically and socially. Please do not take them from their neighbors, their friends, their stability and comfort. Put them on a bus to another school where they have no community connection. Please explore other options, include possibly the creation of a magnet school. We are really counting on you to help us out here. Thank you again for all of your time and all of your efforts with this.
Thank you, Emma.
We have Jason Seward.
This is Jason Seward from 270 Middlebrook Drive. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I thank the board for its continued efforts and focus on adhering to the state's racial rebalancing requirements and working with Fairfield families to work towards a solution that limits the impact on as few families as possible to meet the state requirements. With that being said, I would like to reiterate my view that this redistricting is a violation of federal law and all Fairfield families' civil rights under the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment. The redistricting requirement is solely based on race, which is protected under federal law, and the reference the recent 6/29/23 Supreme Court ruling confirming that discrimination by race is not legal. I continue to request a formal legal opinion from the state of Connecticut outlining how this law and Fairfield Board of Education's implementation of it conforms to this recent Supreme Court ruling. A verbal statement which suggests that appropriate due diligence and legal review has not been completed does not suffice here, noting that the implications of the redistricting are far-reaching and negatively impacting our children across the town, causing undue stress and requiring meaningful time and financial investment. I would also like to voice my concern with option 4, as we'll have my third and youngest child going to different schools than my oldest two, creating stress and challenges for my family for obvious reasons. It is only specific pockets of children's moving, noting that the movements are meaningfully and not viewed to make sense from a bus commuting perspective. And lastly, it does not appear to meaningfully solve the problems in comparison to the impacted children. I again thank the Board of Education for its help in navigating this challenging situation and look forward to hearing its thoughts on these important and impactful issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
We have Dom Devante.
Hello?
Dom.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, my name is Domingo Stefanti. I'm from 226 Homeford Drive. I'm a Jennings dad and I'm a walking family. We're about less than half a mile from Jennings. First off, I just wanted to thank you, the Board of Education, and Mr. Testani for your courage for removing Scenario 1A and Scenario 3 from the list of options. They were absolutely the wrong options and negatively affect our neighborhood schools. I also just want to highlight, someone was mentioning Scenario 3 was the most popular choice, but looking at the data, I disagree. From what I could see, the majority of parents didn't pick Scenario 3. The majority of them picked either not to redistrict or picked none. So that means that the most popular decision is to not redistrict. So I also want to highlight, I don't want anyone redistricting, and I don't think that most of the people in town want to redistrict, including the Board of Education. I hope this resonates with everyone. Every option sucks because we should not need to redistrict, in my opinion. This is something that's been pushed on us by the state, and I don't appreciate it, speaking as a minority myself. And I think this law is trying to help people like me, and I don't want to be redistricted. There's a video from the last meeting in the state where Ms. Vitale speaks to the State Board of Education, and it's very eye-opening. And if none of you have seen it, I think you should, because I think Vitale, I think you were very courageous there, and you highlighted that the effect on our kids who've just gone through 3 years of COVID is important. And I think that everyone in town needs to understand that you said that. So if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'll send you that video, but I think it's very important for you to look at. Going forward, as we look at traditional redistricting, I just ask that we take the concerns of our children in mind and make it a priority. I don't want to hear about resilience. Our children have already gone through a test of resilience. And to that effect, I hope your priorities are maintaining walking communities, maintaining the neighborhood feel of our schools, and most importantly, a generous and robust grandfathering system that accommodates families who are currently enrolled in schools and their siblings. So I've got 3 questions. The first one is, what is the current vision of the grandfathering process? What should those in scope of redistricting expect in the grandfathering process? The second one is special programming and utilization. With the CLC and ELA growing, what benchmarks can we set up going forward to accommodate the increasing classrooms that they're going to need in our buildings? The next one is enhancing Jennings and Dwight. Scenario 4 makes Jennings a 13 section K through 5, right? So it went from a 16 section, right, to 13 section, which means we could only accommodate 272 students, right? And if the special programming increases, I don't know, are we going to need another CLC in Jennings, or we're going to need another one in Dwight, right? And so I think with that.
Thank you, Dom. Sorry, time was up. Does anyone, board member, want to answer some of the questions that Mr. DeFonte was able to raise? Mrs. Kelly.
I'm not going to get to all of the points, but I just wanted to say, and I said this before at another meeting on well, first of all, my thoughts on grandfathering are that I personally don't think we're ready to talk about that yet. We don't know what the scenario looks like. And I understand that everybody's anxious and everybody wants the street maps, and trust me, nobody wants them more than we do, so we can move along. But I really don't think that any of us, unless somebody knows something that I don't know, can have a meaningful, productive, and nerve-easing conversation about grandfathering until we know what the scenarios look like, at least 4 and 4B. So I understand you're probably not the last person on this call who's going to ask us what grandfathering looks like. And again, unless somebody knows something that I don't know, we don't know. And we'll get there when we get there. And I understand there's anxiety, but we're just not there. I'm not going to touch the special programming piece. There's probably other people who want to do that. And then I did just want to say in general, as far as the racial balancing go, I think that Nick has mentioned this many times, that it's not just the imbalance piece, it's also a utilization piece. So we are looking at this more holistically. So there's more, it's not just as simple as racial imbalance. We have other boxes we're trying to fix here. So that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Kelly. Anyone else? Okay, next.
We have Rosie Rao.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Rosie. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rosie Rao, and I live at 42 Osborne Place in Southport. I have a few questions woven into my time. My family is one of 3 ethnically diverse families on my block alone that all attend Mill Hill and currently walk to school. How are we ensuring that we're not moving forward with a scenario that removes ethnically diverse families from one school where diversity, frankly, is still an opportunity, only to shuttle those students to a less diverse school? So that's question 1. I know I heard the last speaker. I know we don't want to get into a conversation around grandfathering just yet. I will just explain my position, which is I would really hope that we would consider a very aggressive approach to grandfathering, meaning any existing family within the public school system is grandfathered in regardless of grade, and that basically new school assignments are considered for anyone that's new to the system in general as a family. If we're not opening to discussing it at this time, would love to understand the timeline for when we could expect street maps for any of the open scenarios actively being pursued. Lastly, I represent the Mill Hill community, and I want to ensure we protect the Walker community by all means possible for Mill Hill. I too purchased my home a number of years before COVID with the expectation that my kids would attend Mill Hill given our proximity. I'm strongly opposed to redistricting in general, as I know everybody here has said, but I'm particularly concerned about scenario 4, as I don't believe expanding the impacted population with a traditional redistricting approach will prevent us from revisiting this topic in the near future. Are we open to still entertaining a magnet school as a potential solution, as previously mentioned? Thank you for your time and your efforts. I appreciate that this is not an easy challenge, but I implore the board to explore new alternatives that preserve the walkers and minimize the impact across all of Fairfield. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thanks. I just want to say something very quickly about the grandfathering issue that's been brought up at our table before. You know, one of the things about talking about grandfathering, we don't know about cost, and some people say we should just pay whatever it takes, but a major logistical challenge for us in the past few years has been hiring bus drivers. One of the challenges in talking about grandfathering and an aggressive grandfathering is the idea that we're going to be running multiple bus routes with, you know, and maybe need more drivers than we will be able to hire. So that's something that may factor into a future grandfathering discussion.
Mrs. Guernsey.
Just in response to your question about the magnet school or a magnet program, I would be very interested in revisiting that concept, and that's one that you know, I hope the board might come to a place that we could look at that again, if not as part of this redistricting, but just as an enhancement for our school system.
I might kick this over to Mr. Testani, sorry, but we just in terms of, I know it was stated at our last meeting on July 20th, but the busing company did give us a rough guideline of September in terms of some possible information, but of course they need us to settle on what we're doing before they would be able to possibly give us some information. But I will reiterate that there is the potential here to have not the busing capacity that we as a board or that the community may wish that we would have going forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, so correct. They will need till sometime in September. The sooner we, as a district, choose something a little more concretely, they'll be able to give us more information. It was mentioned, and it's worth saying that there was grandfathering apparently when the middle schools were redistricted for the entire 7th and 8th grade. That was an easier grandfathering with transportation because there's only 3 middle schools. It is much more difficult to transport kids to 11 different locations in a grandfathering scenario. So I think people need to be aware of that. And you know, it's hard but I think it's worth saying when it comes to the magnet school, because I think you know, the magnet school has the possibility, and I think I was very clear, and I just want to reiterate at the last meeting, the caveat is we are relying on folks to, it's similar in some ways to opting in to whatever school. I mean, everyone assumes it's McKinley, as that was kind of the presentation. However, in reading a lot of the emails that I have received for folks that support a magnet school, at the beginning of the email, they also then in the next paragraph of the email advocate for keeping their child at the current school that they attend, and that's why they purchase their home, they walk. So it's hard to say that there's support from folks when in one sentence they support a magnet, but it doesn't really commit them to the magnet for their children. So that's why I wanted to be cautious, and I think this could potentially be something that will be successful down the road. But if it's to solve our issues here that are being presented, again, I have to reiterate, there's a lot of question marks simply because we're relying on someone else to want to go to the magnet, maybe not the people who are advocating for it. And that's concerning. Had I not received so many of those emails, because I was very excited about the possibility, and I still am about the possibility. However, I haven't seen many emails that say, I would love to send my child to that magnet school. Let's get that going. It's more like, I support the magnet school, but please don't change my walking in the current neighborhood, or I love the school, that's why we came here. So that to me isn't a commitment to magnet. It's a commitment to a magnet concept for me not to have to move. So I really need that to be said, because if we get a bunch of emails that start giving me the indication that people are actually committing now to a magnet school, I think it's something we should really seriously consider in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. I'll speak really quickly to your first point on, the removing diversity from one school, and that may not necessarily be the indicator that SLAM was utilizing for that particular movement, and that may have been a part of the utilization issue that they were presenting in this scenario. So I know exactly the piece that you were speaking to, Rosie, and I wouldn't take that as an assumption that this is about the moving of diversity, but rather part of the movement that was in the scenario 4 that pertained to that section of the school. So that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. Next person.
We have Chris Fisher.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Chris Fisher, 117 Forest. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak and acknowledge how much I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into this exercise. This is clearly a deeply personal issue and one that everyone is understandably passionate about. For me, I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the main goal of the process, which was to ensure a long-term, durable solution to the state-mandated racial imbalance issues and potential utilization problems, but to do so in a sustainable manner that impacts as few children as possible. While I appreciate that scenario 4 is more broadly applicable to all school districts and impacts far too many children, in addition to receiving the lowest score from an independent, non-biased expert, as an example, scenario 4 impacts about 240 more elementary school children than scenario 3, while still impacting most of the same schools in a similar fashion as in scenario 3. Based on the discussion, it sounds like scenario 1A and 3 are not palatable to the board. But if we're going to bypass these higher ranked scenarios and continue to pursue scenario 4, then we need to do so in a manner that is materially impacts less children, while still accompanying the racial imbalance and utilization goals in a sustainable manner. It has been said that this is a Fairfield issue, and for that I agree. We should focus on impacting the smallest number of children as possible and not focus on where those children live and which district they belong to. It doesn't help anyone to impact an additional 240 children. And I realize these maps are being redrawn, so scenario 4 might get better, but that's where the focus needs to be. If we can't pursue scenario 4 and accomplish these goals while impacting materially less children, then we as a community should consider additional or new options, or even electing to do nothing and better understand what, if any, consequences may come from the state, which seems unlikely. Personally, it's an amazing experience to be able to walk to your school friend's house in the neighborhood you play, as well as walk or ride your bike to school. It's an experience I had growing up, and is very much one that I plan to have for my children. And like many of you, I live very close to my school, less than 1 mile, just outside the walking zone, but we can.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry for your time was up. Does anyone would like to respond to anything? Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Yeah, just one brief point, because I don't want to assume that everybody who is on the call or who has been emailing us followed all of the events at our last meeting. But when it comes to the poor rankings of scenario 4, I just want to highlight that the board is well aware of those low rankings, which is why we've asked for another version of it. But that because of how the many reasons that that argue against scenario 1A and 3, that in looking at the traditional redistricting, we are asking for another version of it that will achieve the goals that we ask them to achieve. And so just so that the public knows that we're well aware of those poor rankings, and we expect that the next version would significantly improve on the facility utilization and the racial imbalance in particular.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxon-Canale. Okay, next person.
Yeah, Michelle Hobart.
Hi, my name is Michelle Hobart. I have a rising 6th grader at Ludlow and a rising 3rd grader at Roger Sherman Elementary School. I live on 10 Alden Street. I've been listening to everyone's comments, and I had something planned out to kind of echo every single thing that everyone's saying, because I can't agree with most of these parents and educators thus far. On a personal note, I do want to say that I was recently divorced. So basically, my children have undergone a change that they were not exactly thrilled to go through. So aside from keeping them safe and loved, my next priority was keeping them and their family in their school. So maintaining their children, my children's stability and their support system was my #1 concern. I don't know what I would have done without the support from the Roger Sherman Elementary School during that time, and it's something that I just hold so near and dear to my heart. But again, I can, go on and on about all that, pull on heartstrings and so forth. But we know that Fairfield is known for its, exceptional education system. And I do believe that we have the ability to kind of think outside the box. And I know that the magnet school has been spoken about, and Mr. Testani, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. From what I understand, magnet schools were created as a way to desegregate public schools. And I'm not an educator, so I'm just kind of speaking from what I know. I know that these schools offer something above and beyond regular schools. And I understand you're getting emails where people are saying, yeah, great magnet school, but, I'm not volunteering. Well, I do believe that if you build it, it will come. And if we did put our resources together, instead of using resources to pay consultants to create a school that people, generally speaking, with magnet schools, they have to fill out a lottery application. And again, this is just from what I understand about magnet schools, and that we will probably have an application process where people will be dying to get into this brand new, shiny school with resources. So instead of kind of looking at the negatives, I do think, again, you have to, in most cases, get.
Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, time was up. Anyone? All right, thank you, Michelle.
We have Allison Zamparelli.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, it's Justin Zamparelli. Allison actually registered me. Thanks for taking the time to host this meeting and the investment the board's made and continues to make in our schools and our community. I'm the father of 3 students in Fairfield School District. I live at 88 Catherine Terrace. And to be clear, based on my current understanding of the proposed scenarios, none of my kids is actually going to be directly impacted by these changes. That being said, as a longtime member of the Roger Sherman community, I think it's critical to comment on scenario 4, as it clearly is not in the best interest of our students and our community, recognizing that it is subject to adjustment. I hope we can agree that the students' interests are going to always have to be our #1 priority. We have to value student outcomes and the meaningful impacts that the so-called scenarios have on our students. At the end of the day, these aren't just redistricting scenarios and colorful maps. We're talking about, young people who are the future of our community. So if in fact any of this is necessary, and I think we question whether that's the case, we really have to impact as few students as we possibly can. We have to understand and value the emotional health and well-being of these students. Particularly, this group has already been upended by having had to live through the pandemic. And, do we and the board really understand the impact of pulling an elementary age child out of the school that they've been attending for multiple years, pulling them away from neighbors and friends that they attend school with every day? We have tight-knit communities in Fairfield, certainly the Roger Sherman community, and I'm sure the others, and it's really important that they remain that way. While I understand the additional thoughts going into scenario 4, based on the board's own metrics, it fails to even meet the standard of good on 3 of the 4 defined criteria. after years of analysis and deliberation, it can't possibly be the case that we as a community are going to end up with a redistricting scenario that fails to meet those very basic standards of good on 75% of the board's metrics. One of the key elements was to address racial disparity. It doesn't seem to necessarily even do that particularly well. At the end of the day, with the proposed scenario 4, McKinley's still going to have greater than 20% standard deviation in all 7 years of the look-back period, keeping it squarely in the category of impending racial imbalance.
Sorry, thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thank you. I won't touch on everything, but I do want to talk about a little bit about this idea of impact as few kids as possible. I think this is a natural reaction for most people to have. But what I would want everyone to remember is that no matter how small that number gets, if it happens to you, it's 100% impact. I understand the logic behind it, but I also have talked about on multiple occasions the logic of moving larger groups of kids for the sake of having friends come with a student who needs to change schools. You ask, how do we know how this impacts kids? I've tried not to lean on this too much in the last few months, but I was redistricted in 1981 in Fairfield. I got moved from Osborne Hill to Jennings, and one of the great things about that move was that a lot of my friends came with me. There were also people that got districted to Dwight and to Riverfield that I knew that I didn't see again for years. So I understand that aspect of it too. But when we're talking about smallest impact possible, I really want to remind people that there's a dark side to moving just small groups of kids. And I know that other people on the board have voiced that concern as well. And we're just trying to balance how we can accomplish this, but also trying not to basically scar somebody by moving 3 or 4 kids from a neighborhood. So there's a middle ground in there, and I think we'll try to be thoughtful in finding it.
Okay, next person.
We have Allison McGrath.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for having this back and forth conversation, providing this opportunity for the public. My question currently is really just a logistics question, and I'm sorry if I missed this somewhere, but I was just wondering whether or not SLAM has indicated when they think they can realistically get us a 4B or a different traditional redistricting scenario for you all to consider.
Sure, Allison. Mr. Testani, do you mind answering that question?
Yes, they should have that in a month.
Okay. Thank you.
And as soon as that is available, we will make sure that gets out to the public and that the board has the opportunity to come together to review that new information. Okay, thank you, Allison. Next person.
We have Nakim Amokpo. Kim, I just sent you another unmute request.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. No, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk. I did send an email. I wasn't sure if I'd be given a chance, but thank you all. Again, I've been following all the conversations. As a parent of an African-American son, an incoming, Jennings, graduate 5th grade from Jennings, incoming to Fairfield Woods. We moved from Yonkers, New York 2 years ago to Fairfield just because of the great school system. Of course, it was an adjusting to a new school. In a couple of months, next month, he'll be adjusting to Fairfield Woods. Again, the question around grandfathering and expecting that based on the timelines that he does, consider that he does get grandfathered in and complete he'll be in 7th grade or 8th grade, he should be allowed to complete his middle school. It doesn't make sense to disrupt and move him all the way to Tomlinson, I think is the school. I don't know if any decision has been made. Again, that's one aspect. The other aspect is the distance. Everybody's talked about just being logical based on the address. It's going to take at least 40 minutes or 50 minutes by a bus ride just to get there, whereas Woods is just right around the corner from where we live. Again, that's my request. And echoing a lot of sentiments that pretty much the reason for all of this, redistricting doesn't solve Fairfield's racial imbalance. Speaking as a Black woman, just moving people around is just going to look good. It's more like window dressing. It doesn't really solve, the root cause of really, truly being racially diverse.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone? Okay, next person.
We have Karen Gleason.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Karen Gleason, and I live at 198 Riverview Circle off of Duck Farm Road and a half a mile from Riverfield School. I'd like to first acknowledge that each of you have been charged with a task most did not sign up for, and I really appreciate your prompt responses to our emails and that you have gone to bat for us with the State Board of Education. Being that this is a situation we have been put in by the state, the ultimate realization that children and neighborhoods are going to be moved is upon us. While recognizing this is an opportunity to address other district-wide issues of the ECC and facility utilization, we have now focused in on scenario number 4, which is open to alterations. On the current map, the Duck Farm Road neighborhood, spanning from Alma Drive to Mill River Road, is drafted to move from a bike ride or walk to Riverfield to a 2-mile bus ride to Dwight up in Greenfield Hill. Many of you have walked our streets and knocked on our doors, sharing your appreciation for neighborhood schools. I would invite each of you to revisit our neighborhood and walk the bike path that extends from Duck Farm Road to Riverfield School that my son, along with Riverfield Boy Scout Pack 99, have diligently maintained each and every year. Our homes are the literal backyard of the Riverfield School, and our streets are full of our children and their Riverfield friends at dismissal each and every afternoon. They are walking with their fishing poles along Mill River and with their baseball bats to the Riverfield Diamonds. We are a part of the Mill Plain Road community. I don't expect the consultants from SLAM to understand the connectedness of our community, but I do hope that you, as our elected officials, will advocate for our walkers and prioritize the benefits of children walking and biking to school. Although there are a tremendous amount of considerations for you to make in delineating these map lines, I ask that each of you continue to prioritize community, keep walkers at their current schools, and please ask SLAM to reestablish Brookside Drive as the map line for Riverfield and Dwight, as this is the more practical, sensible, and economical boundary. It is my sincere hope that you will continue to empathize, consider, and prioritize walking communities in your ultimate decision-making. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
We have Jill Vergara. Jill, just resend your unmute request. Gonna move on to the next caller. We have Beth Webster.
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Beth Webster. I live at 144 Pratt Street and have two rising second graders at Sherman. First and foremost, I want to thank the board for your hard work and dedication. I recognize that this is not an easy task and appreciate all your efforts. With that said, I am struggling to understand who benefits from this antiquated law and the current Board of Ed response to it. It appears it is causing more harm than good, and it's extremely disheartening to see how it is pitting schools and neighborhoods against one another. We moved to Fairfield 5 years ago and specifically chose our neighborhood for its walkability to town, to the beach, and most importantly, to our neighborhood school. Even though we technically qualify for a bus, we are only a short walk or bike ride away from the school, and we make it a priority to walk or bike to school whenever we can. Most days you can find my children playing on the playground with their peers after school. Being at a walkable neighborhood school is a huge benefit to our family. It helps us feel more connected to our community and directly impacts our physical and mental well-being. In scenario 4, my children would be moved from our walkable neighborhood school to another school of nearly identical demographics further away. The SLAM results have clearly and comprehensively identified scenario 4 as the least productive and most disruptive of all the scenarios. In addition, scenario 4 was the least favored by residents in the townwide survey. I'm not saying I'm in favor of the other scenarios, but scenario 4 would be a huge disruption to our family and neighborhood. To make matters worse, I'm not convinced that it would solve any of the issues at hand. According to SLAM, Sherman, as is, currently meets the existing zoning requirements and aligns with the targeted metrics. I ask that you please do not disrupt our neighborhood, and I encourage you to explore other options. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Beth. Oh, Mr. Peterson.
Hi, I'll be very quick here. You know, one of the things that I hear a lot in emails and in comments tonight, we talk about the various poor metrics for scenario 4. I submit that scenario 4 is the best one, according to the projections by SLAM, at addressing facility utilization balance. So, which is also a concern of ours. Obviously, that's not what the state is requiring, but that's a thing that we're looking to do. So, just I want to put that out there. It's the best one that we've seen for utilization.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Okay, next person.
We have Jessica Pauls.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Jessica. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jessica Pauls, and I live on 38 Rygate Road. I actually grew up in the town of Fairfield, and as well as my husband, and have great roots in this area. My grandparents have been here for many, many years. I have two children that are in the elementary school and attend Riverfield. First, I think, as everybody has said, a big thank you to the Board of Ed. I know you're taking on a huge task that will probably never satisfy anyone, and so kudos to all of you. But I'll get straight to the point. So I come with two concerns. The first one is moving walkers. I won't go any deeper because I think that this has already been discussed by many people on the call, and I think we all agree that this doesn't really make any sense. My second major concern is really about Dwight and moving children to Dwight. The Board of Ed, not my opinion, but quoted by the Board of Ed, has said that Dwight is a school that needs to be torn down, and based on that fact, I just question any decision to move children to Dwight School, and wonder what the plan is for the school to be rebuilt, and would just ask the Board of Ed to consider that before moving children there. Thank you.
Mrs. Kelly.
Hi. I'm not going to touch the Dwight piece. So if anybody else wants to stew on that one. But I just wanted to say something when we talk about walkers, because I feel like it sounds very simple and it sounds very easy to say walkers should stay walkers. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, because in theory, I agree with it. But there's also in some of the emails implied or right out said that if you take a bus, then it shouldn't matter than if you just get bused to another school. And that I take issue with, just because they're leaving their friends too. So I know we're saying the walkers should stay walkers and they don't want to leave their friends, and they don't want to leave their community. And just because somebody takes a bus, oh, who cares? They can just take a bus to another school. So I just think that's also something we need to be sensitive of. Everybody's advocating for the walkers, and I hear you. We all hear you. I had kids who walked to Sherman, but I just feel like there needs to be a little more sensitivity towards just being so dismissive of, well, you take a bus, so it doesn't matter anyway. So I know that's not what you were saying, but you did bring up the walkers and you said you didn't want to talk about it. So if everybody else is going to take that approach of like, oh, I'm not going to talk about walkers again, I just wanted to take this opportunity then to just say that we can't be so dismissive of the non-walkers. Okay, that's all I just wanted to say about that.
We have Rebecca Rosler.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Hi, Rebecca. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you all so much. I'll be. I think we can all agree we're not happy, or many of us will not be happy.
I don't want, am I the only one who can't really hear him?
No,
Yes,
I can't hear her either.
Or her. I'm sorry. I didn't even know who it was. I can't.
My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to read my notes and speak on speaker. All right, I'll try again. I was saying first, thank you all for all of your time and for communicating with us over email. I'm sure you've been getting just an onslaught of them, so thank you for all of that. One thing to start, I think that a lot of us realize this is a housing issue, and it should not be an education issue, but we are ultimately taking it out on our children. We moved here from the city during COVID. I have 3 kids, first grade and second grade. We will be impacted by this, and that is personal, but I've been fighting since Jennings. I've been fighting since Dwight. I'm here to fight for all of us, and I feel like it is a fight, and I hate that it is a good solution. I don't think anybody thinks that it really is, and I think that 4B is going to be even worse. From my understanding, we would be moving an additional 450 children, and I appreciate the concept of keeping kids together, but that is so much movement. It is terrible for the environment. It is terrible for safety. It is terrible for education. I am a therapist, and I can say unequivocally that this is going to be a mental health crisis for us, and we are not taking that seriously. I understand the state has handed something down, but I do not think that we need to move children by 2024. That's my understanding, at least. I think that we need to make a decision, but I do not think the decision needs to actually include movement. I do not think SLAM is doing us a service that we are paying them. I think we need to start thinking out of the box. And even though we feel like we're in a time crunch, that should not come out on our students, on our children, on our communities, and on our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next person.
We have Kate Scabo.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Sure can, go ahead.
I was hoping to take a little bit of a different approach and maybe ask a few questions of the board. I hear you loud and clear that you don't love the scenarios that have been presented to date and may not even love 4 in its gaps. So I'm hoping you might answer a few questions. The first few being, what is the criteria that SLAM has been challenged with for 4B? And I know you answered that they'll have it to us in a month, but maybe you could explain what the process would be from there.
So I think it's been mentioned before, Kate, that what we gave in terms of our guidance was to get those metrics on the ratings and the scores, so to speak, that came out with 4 better in a 4B, along with the additional criteria that we had already provided to the consultants in our original charge and the considerations and guidance there within. Other than that, I don't know if the superintendent has anything to add to that, but at this point, that is what we were looking at.
Which scores in particular are you looking for them to improve? I'm sorry, Mr. Testani, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. We're just looking to try to tweak where we can more appropriately move some of the programming. The way it stands in 4, it's a little scattered, and we like to concentrate them more in some better located buildings. So some of that could impact some of the current state of what 4 looks like. Could be significant.
Okay, and in those numbers and adjustments are the new affordable housing and additional housing that's been presented and approved by the city, the town, also being considered? And additionally, are we considering movements that are within the elementary school and may not impact those feeder programs? I think I'm hearing a common theme among most of the people that are presented tonight, the concern over the grades and the sections that have been impacted by COVID. And by doing so, I know one of the other scenarios, I believe it was 3, was able to move among elementary schools that maintained those feeder programs.
All approved and known housing is being considered by SLAM.
Mr. Issa.
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that all of the currently approved housing projects on the books that have not broken ground have been, and SLAM has stated on multiple occasions that they are absolutely taken into consideration, including the statistics on how many kids come from each, those depending on the number of units.
And Kate, if you go to our website and you go to enrollment and you go to the top link, you will see our 10-year enrollment projections. And within that specific presentation, there is housing information available and what has been included.
Great, thank you. And just to go back, I know you said we'll get the 4B from SLAM in a month. Understanding that the budget is driving this schedule that we currently have, does that allow us enough time to make any movement on this, or are we really rushing this and making a short-sighted decision?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Issa.
I think as earlier in the call, Mr. Peterson said that we generally start hearing ideas for the budget in November, and in December and January we do our budgeting. So the idea that this plan would be chosen, or a plan chosen by the board, in theory, if we stick to this timeline, will be in time so that we can work through the budget process.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all for your efforts.
We have Jill Vergara.
Hi, can you hear me now? I'm so sorry about before. I had called in on another number.
Hi, Jill. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I did want to thank you for having this discussion. I've been involved in these redistricting discussions since 2015, and I don't recall anything else being held like this that you're hosting, and I really do appreciate it, and I think that it's a service to the community, so thank you. I had called in with my main point being preserving our walking communities and our neighborhood schools, but I think so many people touched on that point very articulately, so I don't think I need to cover that. I did want to also say, please don't change the middle school feeder patterns. I don't know where scenario 6 came from, but middle schools weren't on the table in 2019, and they shouldn't be now, on the heels of an historic pandemic that caused massive disruption for our children and massive learning loss. Please, please think about our adolescents and what they've been through. Please don't add hardship unnecessarily at this time. I also have some thoughts on grandfathering. I have to respectfully disagree with Ms. Kelly. I do think that it's important to have this discussion about grandfathering, especially for high school children that are going to be affected, which we can see from those scenarios. There are some. And I need to hear from this board that there's a commitment to grandfather all of our high school students. I need that commitment now. I think that it would be unconscionable to move high schoolers. I would expect also a commitment to grandfather 5th graders, 7th and 8th graders. All of these kids went through too much, and our kids deserve our care, and we need to spend this money on them. This, whatever cost it is, we need to spend this on them. They've been through so much. And I also wanted to talk about resurrecting the magnet option. I do think that if the option were desirable enough.
Thank you, Jill. Sorry, time was up. Mrs. Ritelli.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the middle school feeder pattern. I did bring it up at the last meeting. Scenario 6, I think it is worthy of a discussion by this board. I think the opportunity to change that doesn't come along very often. And I do believe that the Stratfield community deserves to be thought of. I don't quite think that everybody understands what it's like for those kids. And I can tell you that not only did my child go to Tomlinson, but as I commute her to Ward, early, mind you, because I don't like to get stuck on the traffic on Cornell, I see the Tomlinson kids sitting at their bus stops at 10 after 7 in the morning. And that is worthy of a discussion. We should be talking about it. If there's something we can do, we should change it. Because there's an entire school of kids who is waking up, at the same time the high schoolers are to get to middle school. And as far as grandfathering goes, I do think it's premature to discuss. We don't know what the plans are looking like. We don't know what the finances look like. I understand everyone's concerns on grandfathering, and I'm sympathetic to it. I'm not closed off to it, but I also can't commit anything to it until we see the numbers and see the costs.
I'm going to jump in here as well. The grandfathering consideration, I hear you on that. The board did commit in our charge to the consultant to get the numbers and the counts that are available online for the 5th, the 8th, the 10th, 11th, and the 12th. So we are well cognizant, as been previously mentioned, on the transition years, and then for all of the high schoolers that may be impacted. If you look at the scenarios, the numbers significantly decrease the higher up you go in the grades. And what I can assure you is that we will have that discussion in combination with the information that we need from the bus company once we get to a specific scenario. We do know that at this time, busing involvement in that is likely to be a challenge. So we want to be direct, or I want to be direct with everyone right now, that that is the information that we have, but we will absolutely be having that conversation. So, and on scenario 6, I'm a little confused on that myself. Actually, we have not had any discussion on middle school feeders as during our time. It was not involved in June whatsoever. If the board wishes to do that, then we would need to resurrect some sort of a committee, similar as was done in 2010. We don't have metrics, goals, standards, criteria on that at this time. So if we would like to do that, it's going to take some time on the board's behalf in order to engage in that conversation. As you know, I think, Jill, there were criteria back in 2010. All the machinations of that were looked at with not creating a singleton and some other criteria being one of the key indicators on that. So I do have my concerns on that piece of that. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Next person.
We have Michelle Walker. Michelle, I sent you another unmute request.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Michelle. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Michelle Walker, 127 Blue Ridge Road. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm the parent of 3 McKinley students, and I just want to point out that I've been hearing a lot about the importance of neighborhood schools. It's one of the points that I've heard the most this evening, and I completely agree. But at times tonight, the same people are also advocating for a magnet school, and that plan also impacts the neighborhood community, and that's true for whichever school would be the site. I know the members of the McKinley community, or many, are against any plan to rebrand our neighborhood school. So I would love if we moved beyond the magnet conversation. I want to thank Mr. Testani for his comments earlier regarding this topic. Based on the conversations I have, your points that people like the magnet idea but wouldn't send their children to the school is very accurate. And historically, opting into different schools in Fairfield has failed. So I support moving forward with scenario 4. I look forward to seeing 4B in the future, but I just wanted to make that point clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
We have Christina Schleppman.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, hi. Okay, sorry, my daughter just got something stuck in her hair. Hi, my name is Christina Schleitman, and we live on James Street, and we are part of the Sherman School and community. I have a rising first grader and a daughter who is an RLMS, and she'll be entering 7th grade, who also went through Sherman. I think many of the speakers have stated many of my concerns, and as a community, I feel, this is against our will, and the scenarios do not meet the criteria, and I feel that they will do more harm than good. I think Beth Webster, who is a neighbor, stated it perfectly. With the discussion of scenario 4, our area will be heavily impacted by the plan. Sherman students living west of Reef would be moved to Riverfield Elementary. And while I can appreciate the amount of time and consideration that has gone into this process and understand there have to be concessions, I'd like to ensure that we're properly represented. Our area may not be considered a full walker. Many of our families do, we are technically a busser, but we live 0.7 miles from school if you go the back route, which is the route that we take when we walk or bike to school daily when weather permits. if we're redistricted, we will never have that opportunity again. And I think we've stated the importance of, the community and the impact that it will have on our kids. Our homes are about a 4-minute drive, whereas Riverfield will be about 15 minutes each way with traffic and crossing over 95. My daughter caught wind of this conversation and started hysterically crying. And she's a 6-year-old, and she doesn't understand any of this. The only thing that she knows is she will be taken from her friends, and it will be dismantling programs. I'm a Girl Scout leader, and that will be dismantled. I won't be the 3 parents that are.
Thank you, Christina.
We have Stacy Gorman. Stacy, I've resent the unmute request.
Sorry, I was just speaking, didn't realize I was still muted. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you so much for hosting this meeting and allowing for such robust public comment. My name's Stacy. I'm a parent in the Sherman community. Address is 234 Catherine Terrace. I know this is not easy for all of you as our Board of Education members, and certainly not for anyone in our community. I've crossed off by this point most of what I was going to say, just to not be super repetitive. I'm not sure who the gentleman was that addressed this, but I want to, it's only the first time I heard it, and it was one of my points I was going to bring up. Scenario 4, in whatever iteration it ends up being, will for sure have the most impact across the entire town on the most students. Driving pockets of students from one school to another is arguably more disruptive than moving larger groups of students. It means there'll be small groups of students in each school that will not have a support system of peers that are familiar to them. Teachers they have grown to know and love, and a lot less support than if larger groups of students were moved. It is so much easier for students to feel lost and alone in new school when there's just a few familiar faces. I only heard one other person bring that up, so I just wanted to keep that in to my remarks. I also just want to state one thing regarding the survey that was sent out. I'm just curious what the point of the survey was when you were all recognizing how inherently flawed the results are. But it's just like a statement, don't really, whatever. But just seen a couple of responses to that, and so just curious what the point was. I thought SLAM was going to be on this call, so I had some comments for them, but maybe instead of addressing them directly, I could share with you all something that maybe you can ask them to do. I think their data is great. I think they're obviously doing, their job well. The one question I have is if they are members of the Fairfield community or have extensively driven the routes they're suggesting for people to change to. I think there could be also, they could take into consideration people who others have mentioned, we bike to school, we walk sometimes, or take a 2-minute drive, right? And so others have said, going these different routes to different schools really.
Thank you, Stacy. Anyone want to speak to that? Carol Guernsey?
No, just quickly regarding the survey, I would defer to Mr. Testani because that survey didn't originate with the board. It actually came from his office. Thank you.
Yeah, the point of the survey, if we had as close to 100% participation, I was just hoping to see if we would have gotten some different perspectives other than those folks that were being impacted at the time. I'm sure if we sent it out now, since Jennings is not being considered to be repurposed, those folks may, obviously, they may respond differently. People that do not have any elementary students may have responded differently if they took the time to fill it out. But with only about 2,000 responses, and those that were being impacted, mostly being the ones that responded, it didn't really garner the results that we had hoped for. But it was worth a shot just to see if we can gather some information, maybe some independent folks, to see what their thoughts were on what was being presented, just to, multiple sets of eyes and perspectives. But it didn't happen, and there was no harm, no foul. Again, it was always looked at as just information gathering. It was reiterated several times that it wasn't a vote. Popularity of the choice wasn't going to impact any decision making. So that was the purpose. Simple.
Mrs. Kelly?
Hi, I just wanted to address talking about, I feel like, is someone from SLAM like on a town resident, that kind of stuff. I feel like I just wanted to share anecdotally that like every year, my kids who are at Ludlow, we get our bus stop assignment, and every year we are assigned a bus stop that, as the crow flies, is closer to our house. And every year I have to call and say, my kids will have to walk past 3 bus stops to get to that bus stop. So I think it's important to know that, we've gotten a lot of farms, a lot of emails from certain streets and certain communities that, as the crow flies, maybe it wouldn't be a certain way. So I feel like we keep using the word tweak, and I know some people don't like it because it could have a very large meaning. But when we get these, at least the way I'm interpreting the way things are going to go forward, we will get a 4 and 4B street maps kind of stuff. And that's not, in my mind, that's not gospel yet. That will still be, okay, now we look, and then we fine tune, and we look a little bit closer, and we say, does this street make sense? With the knowledge that we get from the public, like, oh, you're right, this street really doesn't make sense. Oh, right, there is a backdoor entrance to Riverfield where you can sneak your bike in the back. Fine, I'm not making promises here nor there, but I'm just saying the tweaking doesn't stop as soon as we get the iteration back from SLAM, unless any other board member seems to think that that will be, but I highly doubt anyone thinks what we get back is going to be the be all end all. So there will still be opportunity to look at those scenarios fine tuned by members of the public who could, enlighten us on some of those nuances.
Thank you, Mrs. Kelly.
We have Asha Yuganandan. Asha, I've just resent the unmute request. I'm going to move on to the next caller. We have Greg Bosch.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Greg Bosch, 470 Jackman. I want to thank the board, FairTV, and our moderator for this evening. I'm here to talk about grandfathering. We've listened to many parents on this call talk about minimal impact. these parents have to do it through the lens of promoting other scenarios over 4, because this board refuses to meaningfully talk about grandfathering. When you close that door, parents in desperation try to go through another, even if it's to the detriment of neighborhood schools. Grandfathering is a discussion where people can come together to fight for their neighbor, where they can advocate for students instead of against scenarios. Grandfathering is where we fight for community. And so I want to respond very quickly to a couple points to the board and then lay out 4 different schemes. There's nothing that prevents us from having this conversation now. The idea of grandfathering has already been embedded into the magnet by its design, so we've already discussed this for some point. Regarding busing feasibility, Mr. Peterson, problems of redistricting can either be solved by the adults or the children. By refusing to have the grandfathering conversation, we say that problem is too difficult for the adults and we shift the burden to our children. So if busing capacity is going to be a concern, and it sounds like we need to make our intentions clear, 4B comes in a month, busing needs till September, these things are going to hit around the same time, and I'm worried we will be out of time. 4 ideas, and then I'm hoping that you'll actually respond here tonight. Grandfather all high school and middle school students, grandfather 5th graders, so these students don't have to transition twice in 2 years. Grandfather siblings, so we're not separating families. This board has already decided it won't divide neighborhoods. Why we aren't talking about a plan where we don't divide families is beyond me. And finally, grandfather any group that is less than 30 total students transitioning between 2 schools. Scenario 4 has 3 students moving from Holland Hill to Osborne. I think it's nuts. Please, 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 can we please talk about these 4 grandfathering schemes that I've proposed here tonight?
Mrs. Kelly.
I'm just going to address the why we can't have the conversation, or why I don't think we can have the conversation right now, because while, again, all of these things that are mentioned, they sound wonderful, but it's not even a philosophical problem in my mind. It's a capacity problem. So if we choose to grandfather everybody, and some people stay and some people don't go, are we going to have room for everybody? What if some people don't? Like, it's just not, it's not time to talk about, we are definitely committing today to grandfathering every single person who doesn't want to leave. I don't think that that's a reasonable ask of us, given the information that we have right now. Okay. In an ideal world, I would love to say, you don't have to move if you don't want to. I think we'd all love to say that. But realistically, we can't do that. We cannot commit to that. Or if we did commit to that or made that promise now, that would be very irresponsible of us. At least I think it is. So while, again, I understand you want to have these conversations and you want to have these commitments, I don't think it is responsible for us to do that without knowing what it looks like. And I don't know how else to say that. And I understand that is a very unsatisfying answer. It is unsatisfying for me to have to say it, but it's just the way I feel, and just, I don't know how else to explain that. So I'm sorry. I know that's unsatisfying too.
Mr. Bosch, go ahead.
I believe Marco allowed me to respond, and thank you for the response. Look, the community is just going to continue to be divided on this issue, and you're going to see everybody ask for their own special interests. I think grandfathering has to be the next conversation that we have while we wait for 4B, so that the next version of which scenario should we choose is not, well, this one doesn't affect me, but this one does, and so the special interests come out. Again, I don't mean to repeat myself, but this is where we fight for community as opposed to against one another. There's a huge opportunity here. Please, I mean, please, anybody that wants to talk about siblings or moving, only above a threshold of students, like, we really can't have this conversation. I think, I don't mean to be combative. I think the rules are fake. I think we could do it if we had the will to do it.
Mrs. Guernsey.
I've already spoken to my will and interest in having that discussion. So I think that hearing from individual board members about how they prioritize different aspects of grandfathering is important for this conversation. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to share that with the public.
Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Yeah, so on the topic of grandfathering, I understand Mrs. Guernsey's point, but just think now how much time we would have spent on scenario 1A and 3 talking about grandfathering, and now we've eliminated those plans. And think of how much time it took us to eliminate those plans, and we would have been in the weeds on grandfathering. That's why we don't talk about grandfathering early. And I can't imagine how we would have better spent our time doing that so early. I do appreciate Mr. Bosch's point of looking at very specific criteria. And I've made note of that. And I think that if the scenarios take longer to get back, maybe we can start to have that discussion. But I also really do agree with Ms. Kelly. I would hate to make a false promise and then we can't deliver on it. And that is very much dealing with a staffing and a financial issue with this.
Do you think that the moment has ripened? Like, can we do it tonight? This week? Can we schedule a meeting for next week to talk about grandfathering?
So, Mr. Bosch, I think that the response of the board at this time is that obviously we have already included grandfathering in our charge. It is already a consideration for this board. It will be a consideration in the future. How that looks like, we need to wait for the additional information that we need from SLAM to do that. And when we have that information, we will. We know that people are interested in grandfathering. We know that this is a priority and an incredible importance to the community. We have tried to express this evening that there are challenges that we're facing with that. And when we have the information to have the conversation, then we will have it. It's just not possible at this point without numbers, without counts, without, do people need busing? Do they not need busing? Do we have to provide busing? Do we not even have to provide busing? Can everyone drive? Can everyone walk? There is additional information that we need to receive in order to have the conversation in a responsible manner, and that is also fair to the families of the community. So I don't know, besides our willingness and our desire to have that conversation for you tonight, and specifically around what it is you would be looking for, because if you're looking for us to say everything you just said, yep, they're going to be grandfathered, we cannot say that tonight.
Look, I want to thank you for your time. This will just be my last comment. Through advocacy, I think this board understood that Fairfield didn't want to divide neighborhoods, that neighborhoods are a central concern to everyone. And so I would really like to see us not divide families in the next conversation.
Okay, thank you, understood. Thank you very much. Next person.
We have Kristen O'Neill.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Kristen. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kristen O'Neill. I live at 272 Home Fair Drive. I just want to thank the board for giving the community the opportunity to speak tonight. And I'd also like to thank all of you for your hard work on this extremely complicated decision. Many of you have responded to my questions directly, and I really appreciate that. I just had two quick thoughts that I wanted to share publicly. I understand that a magnet school is not in the spirit of fixing the racial imbalance in our schools, and I would never want to dismantle the community at McKinley. However, I hope the idea of a magnet school or magnet program can stay on the board's radar
for some point in the future. Specialized magnet schools, whether it be for STEAM, languages, the arts, are where education looks to be headed, and it would be great to continue to explore those possibilities, hopefully with a neighborhood anchor so they could have some tie to the neighborhoods in our town. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that after listening to the details of this process for the last few years, I am very cautiously optimistic about scenario 4B. If the goals of this process are racial balance and more balanced utilization across our schools, traditional redistricting should hopefully do that and in an equitable way. And I hope that the board and us as parents, along with the help of PTAs, can come together to make these changes in the spirit of inclusion. Each child should be welcomed in their new school with excitement and with open arms. And we have the opportunity now in this next year to plan formal meetups and events across schools so our children will know that they are accepted in each and every building. So if we, as the adults, can approach this in a positive and inclusive manner, all of our children will be better off. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Deborah Razak.
Hi, my name is Deb Herzik. I'm at 206 Orchard Hill Lane. I have a 3rd and 5th grader at Osborne Hill School. Kids may be back to school after 3 disrupted years, but a return to the classrooms has not brought a return to normal. 2022 results from the NAEP showed historic declines in students' knowledge and skills, and in Connecticut alone, widening gaps in reading and mathematics when compared to data in 2019 and the years prior. Students lost critical opportunities to thrive and learn, suffered crushing increases in anxiety and depression, and these are students with disabilities and learning disabilities were placed on the back burner. And despite their resilience, many kids have simply not bounced back. During comparisons to redistricting that happened 5, 10, 20, 30, or as we heard tonight, 40 years ago to redistricting in 2024, it's like comparing apples to oranges. Children will be entering 3rd grade this fall and entered kindergarten in the fall of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. The fact is they had nothing close to a true K year. My own daughter in another school district attended a total of 23 days of in-person school during the 2020-21 school year, which prompted my husband and I to begin a desperate search for a more consistent, reliable school environment to support our children better, ultimately resulting in our move to Fairfield. In scenario 4, as proposed today, my 3rd grader would attend a different elementary school, middle school, and high school from her brother. This would not only impact our family, but our other neighborhood families as well. We all live a mile or less to Osborne Hill, and this is an incredibly disruptive plan. It would not only split up siblings for their entire school year, but also separate these kids from their elementary school peers for the rest of their school career. This would be my daughter's 3rd school in 3 years. I know with the influx of new families during the pandemic, we are not alone. This is all simply too disruptive to do to our kids at this time. I think this question has been already asked, but I would like to find out what the board's view on in keeping siblings together in schools and also in changing entire feeder patterns for some of the kids that would be impacted in scenario 4.
Thank you, Deborah. Jen had to step away, so any board members would like to comment on this? Chrissy?
I feel like a now insensitive broken record by saying it, but without knowing how many families with siblings we're talking about, I don't know the answer to that question. Okay. Again, in an ideal world, would I love to say every family should stay together? Yes, on paper, that sounds wonderful. Just like you shouldn't have to move if you don't want to move. But I don't know how many kids we're talking about. I don't know how many families it impacts. Without knowing that, I personally, and I do not speak for the rest of the board, cannot commit to saying that we will do anything without knowing. That doesn't mean I'm not open to it. I would love to keep families together. Absolutely, I would love to keep families together. I also think that there's an opportunity to, is it more important? And I use air quotes on that because every family is different. What's important to one family can be completely different than what's important to another family. But is it more important for your younger sibling to be with their peers in their new school, adapting? Or is it more important to be in the same physical building as your older sibling who you may or may not see during the day? I don't know the answer to that. Every family is different. But again, without the numbers, I cannot, in good conscience, commit to promising anything. Sorry.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I guess I don't really have an answer for this again, and I know that others have spoken to the fact that it's really hard to say definitively without knowing exactly what these plans are going to look like. But just, I'm speaking at this from a more of a historical perspective, just in terms of, I know when there was the last district-wide redistricting back in 2003-4, there was no grandfathering. Fifth graders moved schools, and eighth graders moved schools or going into fifth grade and eighth grade. They were not grandfathered, and high school was different because they were opening a new high school so they could phase it in gradually. But I remember hearing from parents of students who had kids who were going into fifth grade or eighth grade and saying how difficult it was, and that they were really just devastated to be split from their friends, and that it really wasn't that meaningful for them to have their siblings with them because they weren't seeing them at all during the day, but they desperately missed their friends. And then looking at the middle school redistricting, which I was impacted by, I wasn't on the board at the time, but I had children who were impacted in 2010, when the grandfathering discussion came up, which was after a plan had been voted and approved by that board at that time. Then grandfathering was discussed once the ramifications and the costs and the details of it were known. It wasn't unanimous in terms of the parent feedback, but the majority of parents, again, this was just middle school, so I get it's different than elementary school, but almost everyone to a parent said, please grandfather. You can't not grandfather. And even though that meant, again, splitting up families, you had two buses going down streets for 2 years. So, I mean, I'm coming at it just from that, having that knowledge and knowing what parents at that time who were impacted were saying. I'm not saying that that's the only way or the right way to do it, but that's just a perspective on that topic.
Thank you, Mrs. Gerber.
We have Asha Yuganandan.
Hi, can you hear me this time?
Hi, yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Asha Yoganandan. I live on 95 Brighton View, so we're zoned for Burr, and I have an incoming kindergartner this fall and another one will be going in 2 years from now. And obviously none of these plans impact us. I just wanted to call in with a couple of questions and one comment. One is we moved here 5 years ago and we didn't pick any district based on schooling. We just came in saying that all Fairfield schools are good, so we are agnostic to that. So I'm looking at this from a very objective perspective. So the first question is, has there been any survey or analysis done on the influx that has happened over the last 3 years and how it impacts both the capacity utilization as well as the racial diversity that you're looking at? I know Mr. Assis said that this was a look back, a projection, and I'm curious if there is any kind of error margin built into this that may impact the overall planning. That's one question. The second one is more of a comment with regards to the magnet school. I love the idea. Going back to Mr. Testani, I understand that you haven't gotten a super positive response I personally was looking at Discovery Magnet for my kids. We are a STEM household, so that's definitely something that is there. And I know a lot of people in the same circle of the influx would be very interested in this. I wonder if the tepid response that you've gotten is because of they are from parents of students who are already in the system. Obviously, there's less likelihood of them moving out of the community. And if there's been any outreach done to those who are coming into the system, say the preschoolers, etc., where you would see more of a real response in what could be the capacity utilization of a magnet school. Finally, I had a question, and I think this has gone around in terms of middle and high school feeder pattern. I don't understand why Burr goes to Tomlinson and all the way across to Ward instead of Ludlow. And I'm sure by the time my kids get there, there's probably another redistricting, but just curious. And similarly, why elementary schools from our other side feed into Tomlinson and back to Ward. It seems to be a lot of back and forth.
Anyone want to tackle some of those issues? Mrs. Gerber.
Just speaking to the question regarding the elementary school and middle and high schools, how our feeder plan works is that this elementary school you go to determines your middle and high school. We have 11 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 2 high schools. 2 of our middle schools are within half a mile of one another on one side of town. 1 middle school is on the other side of town. So, and they're in the last middle school redistricting, which took place in 2010, when space was added to Woods. At the time, there were 4 elementary schools feeding into Tomlinson and 3 feeding into Woods. When Woods added space, it was part of that space being added on was contingent upon more students moving into that space. So they switched because Tomlinson was very crowded at the time and had 3 elementary schools feeding into Tomlinson and 4 into Woods. With those changes, that's how it came about again, because Fairfield has, for as long as I can recall, had that elementary goes to the same middle school and on to high school. And just numerically, and I'm not wanting to have a singleton, which is a topic that has come up with this option 6, not having one elementary school community travel by themselves from middle school to high school, that somewhat limits where these elementary schools can feed into in terms of then where they go on to high school. So you're kind of get painted into a corner based on where the schools are and not wanting to have a singleton.
Thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that the pre-K students that we have access to, obviously the superintendent doesn't have access to people outside of Infinite Campus, so to speak. We're not on like a town-wide email distribution system like the town has. And Mr. Testani, I don't mean to speak for you, but the pre-K students that we do have access to that attend any of our preschools were also included in that survey. So that would have captured anyone who responded on scenario 3, on the survey piece of that. There wasn't a lot of response from the ECC population on that survey, but the ones that we have, he reached out to. And in terms of, in migration during COVID, all I can say on that is that we did have new enrollment projections done in June of 2022. So I don't know if you want to call that post-COVID or coming out of COVID, so to speak. Certainly enrollment projections are not an exact science, but again, if you go back to that presentation, it does in quite amount of detail discuss Fairfield's in migration, and we do have quite a bit of it. We have a high percentage of students who are not necessarily born Fairfield, but move into Fairfield. So in migration and the housing developments are accounted for. But, to anyone's point, of course, it's not like a door-to-door census that we have access to be precise and exact at this time. Thank you.
We have Melissa Miller.
Hi, this is Melissa Miller, 550 Old Oaks Road. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Most of my comments that I had prepared were about grandfathering, so just kind of warning the group. I'm going to consolidate them because I think, we've been heard loud and clear. But one thing I do just want to kind of address on that point is, the comments about, without knowing what it looks like. I did hear that we've asked for the numbers and the counts for the transition years, the high schoolers, the middle schoolers, and the fifth graders. But when we're looking at the scenario 4B coming through, to me, there seems to be a really strong push. Obviously, we don't know the data, but to look at the numbers and the counts for, all the families that are impacted. So if we're going back to SLAM and asking for a revamped scenario 4B, I would ask that we also ask for the counts of these families impacted, because it seems to me, we're down to a month till we get scenario 4B. The time is going to get quick. So I understand we can't go back and ask for, all this data for all these different scenarios. But to me, if this is such importance, what sounds like to most of the people, we should at least be asking them to consider what are the numbers and what are the counts for all of those families impacted. So when it comes back from SLAM, we can at least look at this and think about this logically. The other just quick point on redistricting is that I understand, high schoolers are different than elementary schools. As someone who is a mom to a rising fourth grader and a second grader at Stratfield, who would most likely be redistricted to McKinley in pretty much any scenario, I've heard nothing but good things about McKinley. However, I do not want to be dealing with a grader at Stratfield, and a third grader at McKinley. That's two different bus rides, two different field days, two different aftercare programs. Two different school fundraisers. The elementary school, we have to think about it at that level, the amount of activities and things that parents are being expected to be at. I am also a two working, family. It's almost impossible for me to make every meeting and everything with both of my kids at the same school. So I really do want the board to, get the data that we need to really make this something.
Thank you, Melissa.
We have Alyssa Kent.
Hi, Alyssa Kent, 186 White Oak Road. Don't mean to pile on with the grandfathering conversation, but wanted to reiterate a few points and also tie in a few other things. In particular, just thinking about how we can lower the temperature of our town and stop pitting communities against communities, neighborhoods against neighborhoods, making it a popularity contest within a school of who moves, who doesn't move, and really just thinking about what's best for all the kids. And I think by exactly what we did last week in eliminating scenarios and refocusing people and getting people off of one scenario versus the other, we can do the same thing in looking at different ways of doing scenario 4 traditional redistricting in grandfathering and really putting some parameters around that. I understand that a lot of data restricts that, so let's go get the data, right? Let's find out how many families are affected, how many sibling groups there are, how many students that would move in a small cohort. Let's talk about what is the minimum size and regrouping of geography for movement. Looking at neighborhoods that seem like they're next door to each other on a map, but actually are miles apart when you drive between them. Are those appropriate groups to move together? What is this minimum size that you would move a group from one school to the other? I'm in the camp of thinking that more children that move together are more appropriate unless you can grandfather those smaller groups. And lastly, I think if we can really put some parameters around what the transition looks like, what kind of implementation the board and the administration would put towards it, would help lower the temperature of the town in general and really be able to help us focus on what is the best way to move forward for all kids. So I would just like to hear from the board, what does transition look like in an ideal world in terms of social work support, dollars to PTAs?
Thank you, Alyssa. Board members? Mr. Peterson.
I just want to
I want to address one point quickly, and this is something that we've heard in emails and other comments and other meetings about lowering the temperature. I'm all for that. The thing that I keep hearing is hitting one community against the other. And I just want to say from my experience on this board, that's not what the 9 of us are trying to do. I don't think anyone on this board it has anything but the best interest of the district as a whole at heart. That's a difficult challenge, because at the end of all of our decisions are our children and families, and stories and concerns. But I have not heard anyone at this table, want to punish somebody, want to favor somebody else. It's a difficult challenge that we're facing, but I am not seeing it in our decision making, and that's just what I want to say on that point.
Anyone else? I'll just say, Alyssa, thank you for your comments and focusing on the transitional piece of this. I think that is actually a really important component in how both the district, the community, and each of our schools engage in that process once we get closer to a decision and we know what things will look like. Part of that will fall on central administration within the buildings themselves in terms of our plannings, but things such as you mentioned, as the summer beforehand, even beforehand, letting parents know how this is going to work. Looking at, simple, as we've had orientations for our kindergartners in our transition years, will there be an orientation where they can meet their new teachers and see their new building? Will we have a buddy system set up? So I think there's just the PTAs, obviously, and just parents in general, not necessarily only PTAs, but in welcoming their students and ensuring a successful transition for them, in addition to how we do that on a building by building basis as well. So it is vitally important that we give that our deliberation and our thought and our resources for sure. I see a hand up. Is that you, Alyssa? Yeah, go ahead.
I just unmuted her.
Alyssa, are you there? I see the mute button.
Try star six.
Sorry, little technical error unmuting. I wanted to double down on that and really encourage you when the time comes, or even just set it up as a priority to put a social work budget to it, beyond just relying on the PTAs, because obviously that looks different at each school. Having a floating social worker or two, people to really take this on as an actual job. In the transition, I think is super important. It's something that should be started in the 2023-2024 school year. And just to reiterate, never thought that the board was pitting communities against each other. I think it's just a natural response to be, interested in the outcome of your own students and your own students' friends. And I think the more we can give more information, the more that we will be able to lower that temperature. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Kate Macchia. Kate, I've just resent your unmute request.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Kate Macchia, 10 Four Seasons Road. I have 2 children at North Stratfield. Just wanted to thank you all for this opportunity, for this meeting. I think it's been really helpful and interesting to hear your perspectives on all these matters. I realize that a few of you have already commented on the situation, so I don't really have a question per se, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to reiterate my support for at least considering scenario 6. It's been mentioned here that Stratfield students have shouldered this burden of lengthy commutes to school for years. I think this will only increase with the plans redistricting of additional North Stratfield kids to Stratfield. I realize this is not a perfect solution. I realize there's downsides to this, but I do think it's an important opportunity for us to improve the experience of some students. It won't be all, but if we can improve the experience for some, I think it's worthy of consideration. I hadn't even considered the time in the morning that people would be waking up for the bus until one of the board members mentioned it. So thank you for considering it. I had simply been thinking about the length of time on the bus, but I can only imagine that this early morning wake up call will just increase the number of parents driving across town rather than relying on a bus that would come so early and take so long, resulting in significant increase of traffic congestion, not to mention vehicle emissions. I would urge you to consider not only the actual mileage to and from school, as I realize that varies by school, but also other criteria, including the directness of bus routes, traffic congestion in those neighborhoods that are impacted, overcrowding of buses along those routes. Thank you. I don't necessarily expect a comment. If you have one, I'd love to hear it, but otherwise, just again, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Kelly Lane.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Kelly Lane. My husband Brian and I live at 520 Stilson Road, and we have two daughters who will be in 3rd grade and 4th grade during the 24-25 school year at OHS. We appreciate the board listening to and considering our concerns about how the scenario 4 map would negatively impact the social emotional health of our girls and the other children who live nearby. Our girls have always been walkers, as we are only 11 houses from OHS. When we bought our house 7 years ago, the fact that we were only 11 houses from Osborne Hill Elementary School was one of our main buying factors, as we were thrilled our girls would be able to walk to school, to their K-5 school, again, only 11 houses away. We live on the same side as OHS, so the only road the girls cross is Pansy Road, with the crossing guard named Tom to support them. Please consider leaving our girls and the other walkers at OHS. I know a board member stated they were uncomfortable moving just 3 Holland Hill kids to OHS, as that is too small of a group to move to a new school. Please consider 18 students in the same vein. 18 students from OHS to Jennings is too small. This group of students has had inconsistent learning and disruptions due to COVID between their hybrid year and the following year with masks on for the majority of the year. This move will once again disrupt these 18 students' education, as it is unlikely they will have a friend moving with them. Please reconsider moving small amounts of kids anywhere in Fairfield. I know all of you are working hard to try and use natural boundaries that make sense when trying to redraw the lines for redistricting. Black Rock Turnpike, as we know, is a very large, busy, congested major road. Black Rock Turnpike makes sense to use as a natural boundary line. The map in scenario 4 currently has kids on the OHS side of Black Rock Turnpike moving to be part of the Jennings school community on the other side of Black Rock Turnpike. We would feel very disconnected from the Jennings community as we are separated by such a large, busy road. Please reconsider the current map, and please consider Black Rock Turnpike as a natural boundary line that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. You're living in my boyhood home at 520 Stilson Road, so I'm glad to see that it's in good hands. That your address and that neighborhood was one of the things that stood out for me from the scenario 4 map. Obviously know that area extremely well. I walked to Osborne Hill, which is at 760 Stilson Road versus your 520. So I understand the point you're making. And hopefully these are some things that we may be able to talk about once we get further into the scenario and with the map. I just want to say that. I just want to say that there are several areas that I think all board members are looking at this map with some attention to neighborhoods they may know well, streets they may know well, and the plan as you see it in the current scenario 4, I think will change in some ways. We'll need to have a lot of those discussions internally. But again, this goes back to the fact that we are, we're parents, former parents, current parents. We have a lot of on the ground experience with these maps, and I think that we're going to bring that to bear.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
We have Sean Hood. Sean, I've resent the unmute request.
Hi, Sean Wood here, 420 Lally Boulevard.
Hey.
Oh, sorry, Sean Hood, 420 Lally Boulevard. Thank you for your time tonight and hosting this meeting. I just wanted to go back to something we all discussed probably in January. There was a meeting where we really heard some powerful testimony from the ECC staff about their desire for a centralized ECC. We also talked about the benefits that could be done across the community for expanding the peer ratios, offering a full-day program. All of this would be perhaps even income generation for Fairfield Public Schools. It was such powerful testimony that we kind of added that charge into the consultant slam process, but now here we are with that entire consideration off the table. In that process, we asked teachers what they needed. They told us they wanted a centralized ECC, but we just didn't listen to it. We asked the SLAM consultants now to provide a solution. We're not listening to those as well. I understand that none of these options are good, but I think we really need to take a seat and think about how can we focus on student outcomes and how can we ensure that the students being moved are being moved for the right reasons. And I think we should really consider what are our tools to push back against the Connecticut State Racial Imbalance Law with a longer timeline that allows us to consider the more vulnerable and valued population across the district. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Oh, Mrs. Vitale.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight and staying with us. Just in terms of the ECC, while this board did take 1A off the table, that should not be in any way a sign that we are not listening to the ECC teachers and dedicated on devoting a long-term plan. We have 2 schools that are in need of renovation. It came up at the last meeting that in terms of our capital planning, that maybe looking at one location for the ECC might be worked in to the renovations in one of those schools. I wish that we could solve every problem all at once with this redistricting. Unfortunately, due to a variety of reasons, that isn't possible. But our commitment to all of our kids is strong, and we're gonna do the work, and we're gonna give our teachers and our superintendent the support he needs to support our kids. And I've said it at past meetings, I think it's a testament to our school district and our staff that each school community is coming out and speaking with such passion. I know it's easier said than done, than saying that if your child moves to a new school, that they're going to find a place there and that they're going to be taken care of. But I truly believe it because I've seen it happen in past redistrictings. My oldest went through the last elementary school redistricting. While there was definitely some challenges, it was also an opportunity to make new friends and build a new sense of community. But a lot of that relied on the grown-ups in the building, the teachers and the parents. So just rambling on about that, haven't spoken tonight, just taking it all in. And I think that all of us here tonight speaks to our community, and we'll continue to have these discussions and be surprised by where we end off. And the magnet program, I appreciate those people that spoke about the magnet program tonight. I do think that it's a conversation that we should continue to have. I liked Mr. Testani's phase-in approach with the kindergartens And I think that if we do end up doing more outreach to our preschoolers, that should be something that we should discuss with them, in that they wouldn't be leaving an established school community, they would just be entering a magnet program. But I know that we're not taking that any further at this point, but I do appreciate those that spoke in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vitale.
We have John Platzner.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate the board has been in a tight spot on this topic for many years, and you are advocating on behalf of our kids and our community, just like you did during COVID very well, and thank you for that. My kids are particularly unaffected by redistricting, by luck of living at 967 Churchill Road. However, their friends may and likely will be impacted. But my question really revolves around a topic that somebody else raised earlier, which was unaddressed. On June 29th, the Supreme Court specifically outlawed racial balancing for college admissions. That opinion was broad. It was passed 6-3, and specifically saying outright racial balancing is patently unconstitutional. And when a school admits students on the basis of race, it engages in the offensive and demeaning assumption that students of a particular race, because of the race, think alike. So my question for the board, and it's a couple of questions and a couple of requests. One, have you asked both SLAM and a constitutional lawyer if the 1969 law is still constitutional? And would you release that request and that analysis? Two, would you ask the state to reaffirm that law they believe is still constitutional, and why? Three, I think you've mentioned before that we have some overbalanced schools in our district. And let me just state clearly, I know for a fact that Fairfield funds all of our schools equally. We protect all of our schools equally, and all the schools are great, which is why all of us have, lived in this town and moved to this town. But I think what you might want to also consider is a race block.
Oh, sorry, John, time was up. Mr. Asa.
Sorry, I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, except to say if you go back to, I believe somebody correct me, the June 13th, June 27th meeting at Ward. I spent a little bit of time going over the legal reasoning and everything. So I would suggest, if you haven't, to look at that, and it might answer a lot of your questions. And to answer the question as what an affirmative action Supreme Court case means, no one should forget that as Board of Ed members, we are agents of the state. So we are not allowed to advocate to, do something different than the law, whether we like it or not. You as citizens can do what you like and challenge whatever laws that you like, take appropriate actions, but it's not something that we can advocate for. So, if you have an issue that you want to take up at a federal level, that's up to the citizens, but that's not something that the Board of Ed can be involved with.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to put Mr. Testani on the spot, but I guess I will. I do think at our last meeting, through the chair to Mr. Testani, I think you did mention, I can't recall now, forgive me, and I don't believe we have the minutes out yet because it was fairly recent, that there, in your discussions with the State Board of Ed or the Commissioner of Education, that at some point the conversation you had with them did touch on the Supreme Court decision and that it was not impactful on the situation. And if I'm wrong, forgive me. I have a recollection of that, and it was a very long meeting and there were a lot of discussions, but I do think I recall you bringing that up early on in our meeting that night.
We talked a little bit about challenging the state board of ed's decision to enforce the law. They are not imposing any particular solution to the racial imbalance. They're just leaving that up to the board. So to challenge that, they said would be very difficult because they're not mandating any one particular solution to the problem. They're leaving it up to the board to decide. I have had some conversations with some folks. In the meantime, the Supreme Court was an affirmative action admissions to college ruling, and this is a segregation issue, the law as it pertains to Fairfield and the other towns that have schools that are racially imbalanced. Two completely different issues altogether, affirmative action versus segregation, from my understanding from some folks that I've just kind of passed this through. So to Mr. Ace's point, it's not something that we would have the ability to advocate for, but the public does have the right to do that on their own, to challenge it in court if they so choose to.
I'm going to jump in here because it's getting a little bit late and I know we don't have many people, and this is just my own personal feelings, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, and anyone challenge me if you disagree. I think that this exercise has raised an awareness, both sides of the aisle, community-wide. This is not a partisan issue. We all know now that this is related to housing, population density, historical in our community, through our state, our nation, and that per this law, it is this board who has no purview over where any of you choose to live or what gets built where in this town. And that we are the ones that get to solve it or quote unquote fix it. That is incredibly frustrating to me. We don't want to hurt anyone here. I don't either. But I need help from this town to address some of these issues that we all know exist. I'm not saying put 600 units all over our community. But can we please try to address the etiology of this issue together for all our kids and for our town? Because Mr. Asa is correct. Everyone here knows this is a guess. If we continue to have policies that exacerbate the condition, somebody else is just going to have to come back and fix it again through children. That is all I can say on that. I have been hammering on this for many years, and I could use some help from both the state and the town together with us. So I just wanted to get that in while I had the chance. Thank you. Sorry. Next person.
We have Sarah Walker Carpenter.
Good evening. Thank you for this dialogue. I almost feel privileged to get to go after that emotional statement. I want to ask something that goes against my core, because I believe we should always try to do as much as we can. But what if we took the bold move to do less? I don't know the history behind deciding to answer the racial imbalance charge and adding utilization and the programming. And thank you, Mrs. Fratelli, earlier. We don't necessarily need to refer to it as special programming, but all the programming that we have. Why did we take this on at the same time as racial balance? And I ask because these three things
are kind of in conflict of each other. They're all stealing resources from each other. And we are all, as a community, as a board, as educators, very passionate about all of these topics. And we agree that we need to look at utilization. We need to look at our long-term plan for our district because it is one of Fairfield's best assets. You're absolutely correct. I don't know where the rest of the town is and why they are not supporting the board, why they're not actively engaged in these conversations. I don't see them here. If I'm missing you, I'm sorry. Why can't we do the bare minimum today? Solve the issue for the board that's in just 60 to 90 days to get back to the state to have a plan. Maybe we grab magnet schools. We put a couple in the elementary, maybe at the middle schools. I don't think we've given enough time for Mr. Testani and those that want to speak about the magnet schools to understand. I don't think that parents can say if they would opt in or opt out because we haven't heard enough about what that could mean or what that could be. And if we can just kind of, I never want to shoot for the lowest possible accepted, but maybe this time if we backtrack, we can get the new board in place. There's 5 out of the 9 of you that are going to be moving on to other things and 5 new people coming in that are.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, time was up. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Hi, I'll try to be quick. We've heard this a lot in emails, you know, why you're trying to do a lot at the same time. I think that we're trying to do it at the same time out of deference to the community. These are all important aspects of the district's work, and they affect us every day. You know, utilization affects us every day. You know, ECC and other CLC, other programs, co-programs like that affect us every day. Things we need to deal with every day. The fact that we have an opportunity to try to address these things all at once, I think, again, is we're trying to do in consideration for the community that I don't think is going to want to have us come back at them every few years for another kind of redistricting, another adjustment. I personally would prefer to do things that, I've said multiple times, let's roll up our sleeves. We can do this work. It's hard. It's stressing us all out. But rather all at once and try to harmonize those threads than do them sequentially in a way that I think will disrupt the community for years.
Sorry, Mr. Issa, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment to your plea. I agree, and I want to acknowledge. I mean, there's an area for us, you know, to work with the administration, and you know, I believe I can't remember exactly what the specifics are, but some of that housing off Reef Road, the old Navy housing, you know. They've been working on trying to convert some of that to affordable housing. That type of work needs to continue. And I would say to continue on the path that started. I mean, we have people in town now that are doing this. And, you know, I don't want it to sound like nothing's being done, but yes, I agree. We need to all come together and work, but it should be acknowledged that the type of work that's being done has to continue. So I appreciate what's been done and look forward to more. You know, some of that, I think there was recently a property the town bought and worked with Habitat for Humanity. I mean, all these little things that are being done, let's continue to do them and support them.
Thank you, Mr. Issa.
We have Larry Bliss.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. My name is Larry Bliss. I live at 561 Galloping Hill Road. My son's a rising second grader at Jennings. It appears that our home will be redistricted and that my son could be one of a small number of children. I know this has been discussed a number of times. I think it's very important. A small number of children that would be yanked out of Jennings and sent to Burr. My son might be the only one in his grade that could happen to. We respectfully urge the board to adopt aggressive grandfathering that would not move a child who has attended a school for years post the COVID pandemic. That seems like a very reasonable and caring solution for the children. Plucking my son out of Jennings to satisfy, in part, a racial imbalance imposed by the state would be cruel, cold-hearted, and wrong. I refuse to believe that you, our wonderful board, will be cruel. I heard at least one of you talk about this issue passionately, and I really appreciated it. A board member mentioned the dark side to moving a small number of kids, and that a kid could be scarred. Don't let my son be scarred. Don't let these children be scarred. Don't break their hearts. Stand up for them and the other children that could be subjected to such a callous decision. I realize you can't make this decision now. I respect that. Go and do your good work. Go and do the work. Get the information you need, but fight for our kids and seriously consider an aggressive grandfathering that protects the children. Finally, I understand that some of you have had past experiences with redistricting, and that of course is relevant. But in the post-COVID era, things are different. We have to look at these children and the emotional.
Thank you, Larry. Sorry, time had passed. Thank you very much. Okay, next person.
We have Tarang Desai.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, go ahead, please.
Hi. So first of all, thank you to the board. My name is Tarang Desai. We live on 156 Ross Hill Road. I have a fourth grader who's going to be in the fifth grade, goes to Osborne Hill. I think we'll just take a couple of points to truly appreciate the work you've been doing. It's been great to be able to just, have this dialogue, have this opportunity and the platform to voice our thoughts. I think we've talked most of the stuff that I wanted to raise. The one thing that I want to just talk about once again, which I think some people raised earlier, which was for kids that are going from elementary to middle school to high school, think about the grandfathering in an actually considerate way for those kids, because it's very important for these kids who are changing schools. And then for some of them, they are losing a lot of the portion of the friends that they were with in the schools that they were in. And so it's very important that we consider grandfathering in that way for these kids. So that's the one message I wanted to convey. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Katie Flynn. Katie, I've just resent the unmute request.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Hi. Katie Flynn, 204 Grandview Road, and I'm just going to kick right in. So can any of you speak to any data or information that has been shared or presented to the board now or in the past in regards to neighborhood magnet programming or schools, which could be implemented possibly at one, if not two locations in our community? Note that I said neighborhood school programs. As articulated by Michelle Walker from McKinley and others, no one school should bear an overdue burden of solutions, as we know that this does not originate in any of our schools, but in our community. This is a Fairfield issue, and I ask the following questions in support of our neighborhood school model. Greenwich and West Hartford, two of the small handful of communities out of compliance because of their similar community makeup and housing issues, have spent over a decade of investment in magnet school programming with a commitment to only voluntary movement. And while not in compliance, they have reduced their racial imbalance. I recently emailed the Board of Ed several documents that are too long to elaborate on here, but I will specifically cite
the 11.34 shift towards compliance at New Lebanon School in Greenwich from October of 2017 to October of 2021? Secondly, can you speak to any district in the state that has come within compliance of the state statute within the last 10 years and how that was accomplished? Did Fairfield model their planning around any of their strategies? And if so, can you speak to that? Would exploring the reimbursement construction process of diverse magnet programs as other communities have be helpful? Could Jennings and Dwight be good homes for magnet programming or a one-site ECC in the spirit of neighborhood communities growing, not contracting? Have we surveyed new entering families on their openness to magnet programming? While we often hear cited the lack of willingness to move to a magnet program from a current neighborhood school, I would argue that the future of any neighborhood magnet program success would be in the families that choose to enroll versus the families that would choose to leave their current neighborhood schools. And this could be done in a phased-in process to both build the programmatics, available seats without disturbing neighborhood populations, and staffing. As well, could further build buy-in from the community and the neighborhoods, and also give our community timely.
Thank you, Katie. Sorry, time had been up. Anyone want to speak to that?
I'm just going to say that I lost. I appreciate it, Katie. You were speaking so fast. I lost track of what you were asking. So I can't really comment, but I maybe you can send us a follow-up email.
Mrs. Vitale.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Flynn. I think just the point about looking at our sites, Jennings and Dwight, in terms of their future renovations, I think that the board will be open to when those projects come forward, whether or not they would be a prime location for a magnet program or a preschool, being that we've all voiced an interest, I think, in exploring both of those options and at the very least the long term. I know that some of us would like to see each of those in the short term as well, but definitely on this board's radar, appreciating that the board is changing, but you know, a number of you are going to be staying, and I have faith in you in moving this work forward. So thank you for the comment, and we'll make sure that we look at that email that you sent, Katie.
We have Leslie Mertz.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for hearing our comments tonight. My name's Leslie Mertz, and I live at 281 Orchard Hill Lane. I have a rising sixth grader, a rising freshman, and a rising junior. I understand everyone is looking at scenario 4, and we've talked about a lot about keeping neighborhood schools, and I just wanted to reiterate how important I think that is. It seems to me in the scenario 4 that we're taking small pockets of people from neighborhoods and schools and moving them. And I think that is much more detrimental to kids than moving large groups of people, as they will have no support and community support. In my case, half of my neighborhood is currently being looked at moving. We have block parties, we have a large neighborhood community, and they're taking a small piece of this and moving the feeders and everything. So that is a huge concern for me. Additionally, as we talk about grandfathering, that's also a huge concern, as I have older kids. And when we talk about things like funding meetups and things like that, I don't know that that helps with older kids. So I just wanted to raise that. And I guess thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. Ms. Vitale, is your hand up or is that from before? Okay.
Before, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Leslie.
We have Lauren Efron.
Hi, Lauren Effin, 241 Burr Street. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, go ahead.
So I am at 241 Burr. I'm part of that small little pocket, 14 kids that would go from Dwight to Burr, and then my middle schoolers, of which I will have 2 at the time that this takes place, and I'll still have 1 at Dwight, would then get moved, I suppose, as well. So sort of in a unique position. I know I'm not the only one. My questions and concerns are going to sound a bit like a broken record. I apologize. I know it's aggravating to you to hear the same things over and over again, but I do appreciate the discourse that you provided to the public to comment tonight. So I'll just get straight to it. Scenario 4B, these 14 kids that you're moving from our little corner of Burr Street and the surrounding area, I do not understand why we're taking such small pockets. 3 kids from Holland Hill to Osborne Hill. I see it across the district. 18 kids from Jennings to McKinley, 18 kids from Jennings to Burr. I agree with Mr. Peterson. I believe that there's a dark side to moving such small groups of kids. I can see us disrupting their feeder patterns and social groups. I, like many of other people, moved in 2020 from the city. We wanted more space. We wanted better schooling for our children. I'm so glad that we arrived where we did. The community of Dwight has been welcoming and wonderful. And I'm sorry to get emotional, but I don't want to see. Sorry. I'm sorry into my 2 minutes. I don't want to see us having to break up our peaceful house and family and have my kids' lives disrupted. So I guess my question is...
Hey, Lauren, take a second. It's okay. We're going to give this a pause for a minute, okay?
Thank you.
Take a breath.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
I am a crier. Okay.
Me too.
That is not how I wanted to start out. Okay, so I thank you for the pause.
Sure.
So I guess, I've got a couple of questions about the utilization of Dwight. I know our small school. We appreciate it. We love it. Like I said, they've been great. In its current state, the building in its current state, are we able to take on the 77 extra kids that you're talking about? A large chunk of those who are walkers, as we know from Riverfield. I don't think it's fair to that community. I'm not sure how our current building could handle I know we're underutilized. I understand why you went with 4B. I guess I'm just trying to understand more clearly why we could take on an influx of so many children at our small school. And also, and no one wants to touch this, I realize, but what is the plan to renovate or rebuild? Are we going to slice these kids up once again after moving them? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Asa.
I just want to clear one thing up. So the caller keeps mentioning, 4B and then referencing these small pockets. Just to be clear, we moved forward philosophically scenario 4 with the majority of the board and have asked, as we've said, for redrawn maps and coming better within the matrix and whatnot. So I think we need to just take a pause and let's see where SLAM comes back knowing this with a potential 4B, and let's see where it is. And I think this board has expressed the idea of trying to move kids when we move them in groups and cohorts and in areas clustered. So I think that's it. With regard to Dwight, I think with any school, we need to be balancing the utilization and using our buildings to their fullest extent and making sure that it's balanced, that one school isn't underutilized while one is overutilized. So I think that is the work that we're doing here. And as for the renovation, it is on our waterfall. We've discussed this. this board decided that air quality and air conditioning was a priority. And that doesn't mean that we don't care about Jennings and Dwight renovations, but the majority of this board chose to move forward with a phased air conditioning project, which we're in the midst of now, which is an approximately $80 million project over the years. And that's what we're doing. So working in a building rebuild or major renovation in the midst of the AC project and not potentially having to make some concessions or push things off is a discussion that has to be had, because there's only so much money you can bond. And we've had these discussions. So it's not a popular thing to say, but I feel like I have to say it.
Mrs. Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Asa. And in terms of Dwight, we started these discussions last school year with just whether or not we could operate with 10 elementary schools, and the closing of Dwight was run by SLAM. So we wanted to get that information as well. It was an important piece just to see in terms of doing our due diligence. As Mr. Asa said, there's only so much money we can bond at a time. And this board wanted to move forward with the district-wide air conditioning project, and we also wanted to get some information on what our capital footprint is going to look like. I think that the work that we've done through these redistricting conversations and the scenarios that SLAM has brought back to us has provided us with some information moving forward. And this is a question really for you, Ms. Jacobson. We're having this community conversation, and I want the community to appreciate that. I think the board is taking, your feedback. So as Mr. Asa said, we approve 4, but I think that we also appreciated that it was likely to change based on this conversation. I'm glad the superintendent is part of this. I'm sure he's been taking lots of notes, and he's going to be working closely with SLAM, so some of the feedback from tonight will be passed on. I don't want to speak for everybody, but based on some of our past conversations, I think there was a real concern about just moving that handful of people. And we're not taking action tonight, but I think, is that a safe assumption for the superintendent in his communications with SLAM, knowing that that's a concern of this board?
Who are you asking that question to?
I think I'm asking to you. Is that a safe assumption, Ms. Jacobson, that we could, or the board really, or Mr. Testani, that we're hearing loud and clear that moving 3 kids at a time is not something that is desirable?
Yeah, I think that we should be clear in what that means. So does that mean not moving them at all and leaving them where they are as a result, versus making it be more people pulled into that movement? That is a clear distinction that I believe that the community has expressed a wide discrepancy in, and preference being don't move them at all, but if they are, bigger pockets. So it is quite dependent in terms of the advocacy here this evening, in terms of least possible to meet our goal versus understanding the hardship that a small pocket would represent. And as I think Mr. Peterson stated earlier as best, is that's a hard balance. We have not set a metric, like don't move less than 30 or 40. We started our conversations with SLAM as well. We could have done that in January. And it was, don't restrain the consultant in their work. Don't constrain the consultant. Don't give them too many specifics. We want them to do what they need to do in order to meet our charge. So go ahead, Mr. Asa, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I think it should be said that SLAM sat at the table and told us, look, once you guys pick a path to go down, we are going to dive deep and get into this. And I think they even referenced, some of the areas where it moved 3 kids that they said they understood. But this was a first round, a first draft. Pick your path. Then once you pick your path, we're going to refine it. They have their matrix. They've heard us. So I think it's safe to say that we're on the right course, and that we have to see what they come back with.
Yeah, and just to be clarified for the public, it's 4 plus a 4B. And then we will go from there once we have the 4B, whenever that comes back, hopefully sooner rather than later. Sorry, Mr. Testani, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that and it's important for people to hear that as an educator, my goal first and foremost is the well-being of children. And, you know, as we get now to Mr. Ace's point, a pathway, I think the traditional redistricting as it's categorized is the best way to start playing around with things to accomplish our goal, but not impact 3 kids at one school. And it's not even about the amount of kids only, but it's also what grade levels those kids are in. Because I don't think it's going to be very helpful if 40 kids get moved from a school, but you're the only 4th grader. I don't think that's comforting enough. So I do think this gives us, as an administration, the most flexibility to work with SLAM. It also has given us the opportunity to start looking more deeply at space, floor plans, what type of rooms they are, so that we can shift around some things that may reduce the impact that you see in 4 dramatically. So I think people just need to, and I know it's a hard thing to say, I don't want to say they need to just take a step back, because this is really important. It's the lives of their children, but really try to trust us as the educators who have the best interest of their children at heart. I can guarantee you that, and I promise that.
Thank you, Mr. Testani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Siobhan Greiner.
Hi, my name is Siobhan Greiner. I live at 83 Smedley Road, and I have an incoming 5th grader, 3rd grader, and kindergartner at Osborne Hill School. Thank you so much for holding this community conversation. I greatly appreciate all of the hard work you've all been doing on behalf of our community. I've emailed the board several times regarding the concern I have with all of the scenarios that move small groups of children from one school to another, scenarios that affect my children or not. My kids aren't currently redistricted in scenario 4 in its current iteration, but I still feel strongly on this issue. I have some serious concerns about small groups of under 30 or so children being redistricted from one school to another school. By my count, there are 6 groupings within scenario 4 that move groups of under 30 children from one school to another, and 10 groupings that move groups of under 40 children. If a group of 20 K to 4 students is moved from one school to another, on average, that would mean that 4 children from each grade would move. Think about what that means to move 4 kids or under per grade to another school. It is very likely those kids could move to a new school without a friend. I realize that some children are more adaptable than others, but please recognize that the mental health burden of a redistrict so soon after the isolation and mental health ramifications of COVID is likely going to be a higher burden on children that are moved in the smallest groups. Personally, I believe there is a moral imperative to do the utmost to ease a redistricting transition for small groups, and I would advocate for creative or flexible redistricting policies in these cases. I realize based on the previous comments in this call that the board isn't ready to address redistricting at length at this time, but I do ask that the board begins to research how other schools handle grandfathering so they can understand the various models and options. I have done some research into the ways that many other school districts around the country handle grandfathering, and I emailed some of this information to the board. I have also looked into Connecticut state laws on transportation and emailed that information to the board. I realize.
Oh, sorry, Siobhan. Thank you for your comments. Any board members? Okay, thank you. Next.
We have Andy Cook.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Hi, Andy Cook, 202 Alden Street. Many of my questions have essentially been answered. I guess as a way of background, so I purchased my house here with the expectation that my current son and any future kids would be going to Sherman. And now sounds like that goalpost, unfortunately, is being moved. But I guess my question is, so is it a foregone conclusion at this point that it's going to be scenario 4 or a derivative of scenario 4? I know a lot of people have expressed a lot of other issues about scenario 6 or doing nothing or magnet schools, but I guess, can I get a direct answer on which way this is going to go?
Sorry, Mr. Asa, go ahead.
I think, to be clear, when we came out of the last meeting, we didn't vote, but we took a sense of the body. And 1A garnered, at the end of the conversation, one board member. Scenario 3 had none. And 4 had 7. Some were reluctant, some had reservations. Actually, a lot of us had reservations about how it was written. So I would say from the ones on paper that were presented, the board chose to go down the path of 4, as we've said, and have asked for a new variation of it, a 4B, as Ms. Jacobson called it. So I, for one, as an individual board member, would answer you, yes, this is the path we're going down at this point, and there's still work to be done. Quite a bit of work.
Thank you, Mr. Asa. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Andy.
There are no more callers on the line currently.
Okay, first, thank you so much to you, our host, for managing all of that for us this evening. Much appreciation for you in doing so. I'd also like to thank everyone who either signed up to speak, maybe couldn't come, or have watched and will listen in the future to this conversation. I think it was really helpful for us to be able to come together in a way that isn't public comment at our regular meetings and just be able to converse with each other a little bit in a more informal manner. Moving forward, at this point, we do not have any other board meetings on the schedule at this time. What we are really waiting for is for the 4B, so to speak, to come back from SLAM. I hope that that will come back as soon as possible. When it does, we will reconvene. And I hope that will be before our first meeting, regular meeting of the year, if at all possible, with the availability of our board members. So keep in, yep, Mr. Asa?
Yeah, just to clarify 2 things. We don't have any meetings scheduled this summer until our next regular August meeting, which is the new school year and not new year, just in case some people in the public are not familiar with
school
our
year,
terminology. So
I only work on school calendars.
Yes, but a lot of the public that is engaged now has never heard that. So
just another kind of year.
Just to be clear, our next regular meeting is scheduled, correct me if I'm wrong, is August 29th. And if we have information from SLAM prior, we may try to schedule a special meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. In the meantime, please feel free to continue conversations with us as individuals in emails. And I know that we are all reading the emails and trying our very best to get back to people when they have a question. So other than that, unless anyone else has a comment, I'll open it to the board for a second if you would like to. Mr. Asa?
Yeah, just want to clarify one more thing, and thank you for saying that. We've had a tremendous number of emails, and I've said this at many meetings. I try to reply to as many as I can, and I honestly don't get to all of them, but I do read them all. And I just, for the public, so they know, a lot of people have recently become engaged. So you understand the reason that we don't reply all when we get an email sent to the board. We don't reply all because if we reply all, then all of the board members are on there. And if anybody else starts chiming in and it's talking about business, that could be construed as a meeting. And for FOI purposes, we can't do that. So please don't take insult if we reply just to you. And then if you reply and CC the BOE and that member just replies to you, there's a reason for that. And I just wanted to throw that out there. And thank you to everybody that participated tonight. I think this was, while there's a lot of emotions and different feelings of different people, I think this was very productive.
Any other board members? Mr. Testani, any closing remarks?
Just want to say thanks to everyone for taking the time. I know it's tough during the summer months, but their commitment to children and to the town is unparalleled. And my hat goes off to everyone who took the time to spend a couple of hours with us tonight to advocate on behalf of what's best for Fairfield Public School children. So thank you.
I'll give everyone a heads up that we will have another one of these community conversations in the early fall. So keep an eye out for that. It will be in a larger capacity building where we will be in person for that one as well. Hopefully by then we have the 4B information, some of the initial estimated costs from central office around these topics, and hope to engage with the board in this way, in addition to our regular meetings again in early fall. So keep an eye out for that. So with that, I will bid everyone good night. Thank you for being here. And we will see you soon. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry. Motion to adjourn.
Right in here.
Mr. Peterson, seconded by Mrs. Vitale. All in favor. Motion passes unanimously. Good night, everyone. Thank you, guys.
Good night.